Chapter 5:21. Immediately afterward, Sharon began to analyze. And as far as we can see, our three-party cooperation can cause an overwhelming force to one of them, but if we deal with both forces at the same time, we will inevitably be suppressed by both sides. After all, although we have a large number of servants, if we deal with both forces at the same time, we will have to split up. Whether it's Greece or Rome, I don't think I'm a pushover, so I think we are likely to suffer losses. Wuming nodded. Sharon was right. If Wuming was not included, it could be calculated like this. The leader of the Celts, Maeve, had 3 servants, Finn, Dilmaud, and the unknown Indian servant. Needless to say, Maeve and the other Celtic servants were not weak. Although Silent Wonder had never seen the Indian servant before, he knew that the Celts were quite powerful since they were related to Rama. The American forces only had 3 servants. Needless to say, the leader Edison was very weak, and Helena could only be an auxiliary mage. The two's combat power was not high, only Garna was strong, so they did not dare to act rashly. The leader of the lone servant force could be said to be Gadazzi, and there were a lot of servants: Matthew, Achilles, Sharon, Geronimo, Robin Hood, Billy Boy, Kyoheim, Elizabeth, Spartacus, and Rama. As for Tamamo no Mae, she was temporarily assigned to the lone servant force. Although they had the largest number of servants, there were not many who had strong combat power. Strictly speaking, only Achilles, Sharon, and Rama had first-line combat power, and the rest, whether it was Geronimo, Robin Hood, or even Billy Boy, they were not strong. As for Kyoheim and Elizabeth, well, if they were compared to Wuming, Garna, and others, they would be honest mascots. Well, if Kyoheim didn't shout Anjin-sama, and Elizabeth didn't sing, they would become very popular. Tamamo no Mae's words were mentioned before. If she was summoned as a berserker or some other job rank, Tamamo no Mae would be able to unleash the terrifying power of one of the 3 great monsters. But now she was just an ordinary witch fox. Lastly, if Spartacus could release his noble phantasm, he would be a very good troublemaker. However, he would be tied up in a few moves, so he could not be counted on. Moreover, even if he did release a precious artifact, it would be self-destructing, and the price would be too great. Didn't you see that Caligula's berserker, who didn't have any powerful abilities, was stabbed by a noble phantasm? Although it was inappropriate to say so, in the face of a top-level servant like Wuming, Wuming was certain that no one present, not even Sharon, would be able to survive if they fought with their lives on the line. Although it seemed like Wuming was a little arrogant, unfortunately, this was the truth. Karong is right. Since that's the case, let's split into 2 teams. Wuming decided to eliminate one of the forces first, and then attack the remaining forces. Immediately afterward, Wuming told everyone about his opportunity. They were still divided into 2 teams. The first team was led by Sharon and Geronimo. Robin Hood, Billy Boy, Kyoheim, Elizabeth, plus Edison and Helena, a total of 8 people. Their task was to go to the Roman camp and use all kinds of tricks to distract the Roman forces. The purpose was to delay the Roman forces and have no time to deal with the Greek forces. The Greek forces, on the other hand, were led by Wuming and other powerful servants to form the second team to eliminate them. Wuming returned to Washington first, and then led Maeve, Finn, and Dilmaud to Greece. Karna, on the other hand, was to join Rama, Achilles, and Spartacus to attack the Greek forces together with the Celtic forces brought by Wuming. For now, the Greek forces were much more difficult to deal with than the Roman forces. The Arcadian huntress, the divine magician, and the demigod hero were all stronger than the less mysterious Caesar, Cleopatra, and the others. Because of this, Wuming decided to gather powerful forces to eliminate the Greek forces first, and then attack the Roman forces. When Wuming and the other servants of the second team attacked the Greek forces, Sharon would lead the first team to entangle the Roman forces. Facing the less mysterious Roman forces, Wuming believed that Sharon and the others would not suffer any casualties. After all, they did not have to fight with their lives on the line. They just had to interfere with the Roman forces. That's a good plan. After all, even if we go to Greece with the second team, we won't be able to do much. It's better to go to Rome to interfere. Sharon agreed with the plan. The rest of the servants, Geronimo, Tamamo, and Karna, also had no objections. At this time, Gudazzi spoke. That Matthew and I? Gudazzi asked weakly. Matthew also nodded. They could not contact Chaldea at the moment, so Gudazzi and the others could only decide what to do next for the time being. Wuming pondered for a moment, then said, Tachika and Matthew, I originally wanted you to go with Sharon, but as the master, I have to ask for your opinion, so you can choose which team to follow. After hearing Wuming's words, Gudazzi and Matthew looked at each other. But it didn't take long for Gudazzi to speak under Matthew's affirmative gaze. Matthew and I will follow Teacher Ma's team. Then, Gudazzi stated her reason. After all, you have to fight for your life. If Matthew and I go, it may cause trouble for you. After all, Matthew is not good at attacking. Let Matthew and I go to Rome to interfere. Gudazzi said to Wuming with a smile. Although Gudazzi wanted to go with Wuming, she knew that she was a human master, and her servant Matthew was only a defensive type. Following Wuming and the others' attack team would inevitably cause trouble. Therefore, Gudazzi suppressed her desire and chose to go with Sharon and the others to Rome. It's really hard for you, Tachika. It's great that you can think like this, Wuming said as he touched Gudazzi's little head. Although Wuming could also protect Gudazzi, he was always somewhat restrained. Therefore, Wuming was really pleased that Gudazzi could choose to follow Sharon to Rome. It's nothing. I think if the doctor and the director were here, they would let me choose a team. Gudazzi smiled slightly, enjoying Wuming's touch. Retracting his hand, Wuming looked at everyone. Since the task has been assigned, then I will leave first. I will inform Edison to meet you here later. At that time, I will use Edison's communicator to talk to you. Later, Geronimo informed why Lisabeth and others of the plan. They naturally had no objection, and they were quite excited. Especially after Kyoheim knew that she and Gudazzi were in the same team. In this way, Wuming and Karna left together, and everyone was preparing for the upcoming battle. Chapter 522. Wuming and Karna left Riverton, but they were not going in the same direction. Karna was heading to the Great Lakes, which was the territory of the Greek forces, to look for Rama and the others. Achilles, Rama, and Spartacus set off during the day. According to Wuming's speculation, even if they were there, it was unlikely that they would rush into the Greek followers recklessly. Maybe they were just observing. After all, after this crisis, Rama also found the problem. Recklessness would not only fail to save his wife, but it would also put him in danger. After all, he was a king. Even if he was more impulsive when he was young, Rama was not ignorant. At present, there had been no movement from the Greek side, so Wuming judged that they had not made a move yet. This was good. Karna could meet up with them first, then lurk and wait for reinforcements. As for Karna's identity, Wuming gave him a Loon runestone, which contained a video recorded by Wuming, which was enough to prove Karna's identity. Besides, Achilles had also teamed up with Karna before, when they were 14 knights, so he knew that Karna would not lie. Therefore, Wuming was not worried about Karna's identity. In this way, Karna headed toward the northeast. Wuming, on the other hand, went south, preparing to use his assassin behavior to pass through the gap between Greece and Rome and return to Celtic. Coincidentally, although it was daytime when Wuming and the others attacked Giro City, it was almost dark when they arrived at Riverton. The night was suitable for Wuming to sneak away. However, Wuming thought about it carefully and laughed. Not to mention that it would take too long to carefully rush back. Wuming had a portal. Wuming had to rely on himself before because he had never been to those places. Now that he needed to rush back home, wouldn't that be putting the cart before the horse? Therefore, Wu-ming directly opened the portal and went to Washington. In the president's office in Washington, a black-purple spatial ripple appeared in front of the desk. Then, Wu-ming walked out of the portal. "You're back." Wu-ming let out a long sigh of relief, giving off the feeling of a wanderer returning home. However, Wu-ming chuckled self-deprecatingly. The feeling of home could only be felt in the root. After that, Wu-ming looked around the empty office. The office gave Wu-ming the feeling that no one had come here after he left. The books on the table were still the same as when Wu-ming left. "Xiao Sai, you're back." At this moment, the door to the office suddenly opened. The person who called Wu-ming Little Sai was undoubtedly Maeve. Then, Maeve threw herself into Wu-ming's arms. "I'm sorry, Maeve. I was delayed by something and came back late." Silent Wonder smiled at Maeve. His smile naturally contained an apologetic tone. However, Maeve didn't care. After shaking her head, she broke away from Wu-ming's embrace. Then, Maeve hugged one of Wu-ming's arms and said with a smile, "It's good that you're back. If there were outsiders here, they would probably be scared to death by Maeve's behavior." Therefore, the cold, arrogant queen who didn't treat men as humans had become so gentle. She was many times gentler than before Wu-ming left. Even Wu-ming was shocked. Was it because they hadn't seen each other for a long time that led to the release of mental stress? Ahem. In layman's terms, absence makes the heart grow fonder. Wu-ming sat on the president's chair without the slightest bit of guilt. The poor president had already died. Wu-ming hugged Maeve, who was sitting on his lap, and began to tell her about his experience. Maeve, on the other hand, was listening attentively, her big eyes sparkling. "In other words, as long as we join forces with the American forces and followers to eradicate Greece and Rome, we will win." Maeve smiled sweetly. Wu-ming nodded. Then he asked Maeve a little strangely, "Maeve, why are you so happy today?" Wu-ming asked. Since she came in, she had been very gentle until now. She was much gentler than the Maeve from a few days ago. Of course, she was still not as gentle as an ordinary girl, but this was not easy for Maeve. You can't expect a queen to be gentle. This was already a very gentle level for Maeve. Facing Wu-ming's puzzled question, Maeve hugged Wu-ming's neck and looked at Wu-ming's face and said happily, "Because Sai took off her helmet." When Maeve said this, Wu-ming realized that he didn't wear his helmet anymore. No one knew when it started, but Wu-ming had taken off his helmet and maintained the appearance of only wearing white armor. Wu-ming would only close his helmet during the battle, but once the battle was over, he would take it off again. Although Wu-ming was used to it, Maeve was not. She had never seen Wu-ming's true face in this singularity. Of course, it didn't mean that Wu-ming covered his true face to make Maeve suspicious. After all, no matter who it was, if their lover always covered their face with a mask when they were with their other half, the other half would be very depressed if they couldn't see their lover's face. "So, I won't wear a helmet in the future, how about that?" Without apologizing, Wu-ming asked with a smile. With the relationship between the two, there was no need for an apology. "Yeah, but no matter what, I like Little Sai's." Maeve gently leaned in Wu-ming's arms and enjoyed this moment of peace. Wu-ming gently patted Maeve's back and enjoyed a moment of peace with Maeve. Sure enough, Maeve is actually just a little girl who lacks love. After a moment of tenderness, Wu-ming and Maeve left the office. After all, there was no time to lose. It was better to mobilize the troops and start the final battle. By the way, Sai, that Indian servant left our side. Left? What happened? Although leaving a servant was not a big deal for the current situation, Wu-ming still wanted to know the inside story. That servant is the hero of India, Achuna. He temporarily joined us on the grounds of following us to find Karna. Soon after he left. Wu-ming was taken aback. Achuna's mortal enemy was Karna. It seemed that he was still very persistent after death. No wonder he had some relationship with Rama. Rama was the 7th incarnation of Vishnu. Vishnu's 6th incarnation was the axe-wielding Rama, who appeared in the Mahabharata. It had some relationship with Achuna. But more importantly, the axe-wielding Rama was Karna's teacher. Karna's spear was transformed from the axe-wielding Rama's eternal blade. Wuming's heart suddenly skipped a beat. Karna won't meet Achuna halfway, right? Chapter 523. Maeve, gather Finn and the others and head to Chicago. I'll go check on Riverton. I have a feeling that Ajo and Karna have met. When it came to serious matters, Maeve was not ambiguous at all and immediately nodded. Wuming opened a portal and walked in. After Maeve saw Wuming leave, she reverted from a pretty girl to an incomparably domineering queen. She then gave an order to the Wuming guards outside. All troops, head to Chicago. Outside Riverton town, a dark purple teleportation gate appeared. Wuming walked out. Although Wuming was going to Riverton, Wuming chose the place where he and Karna had parted. Wuming looked in the direction Karna had left. Lightning and fire kept appearing in the sky there. Wuming immediately took out his communication device and contacted Edison. Even if Karna and Ajo met, they wouldn't be able to determine the winner in a short time. "Hello, this is Thomas Edison." The Lionhead's deep voice came from Wuming's communication device. Listening to Edison's incomparably serious voice, Wu Ming was amused. Could you imagine a giant lion head seriously talking on the phone? "I'm Serene, President Edison." Wuming then told Edison to attack this place. Wuming also told Edison that Karna was with him. "Understood. I'll go to Riverton with Lady Helena immediately with the mechanical infantry," Edison said seriously. Edison said solemnly and then hung up the communication device. Wuming smiled helplessly and put the communication device away. Wuming didn't go back to Riverton. Instead, he ran toward Karna, east of Riverton in the Missouri River basin. At this moment, two godlike figures were fighting. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Several bolts of lightning shot towards the running Karna from the top of a small hill. Bang bang! Karna swung his spear and deflected the lightning arrows. The falling bolts exploded on the ground, creating many craters. Then, Karna condensed mana on his spear and swept it toward the small hill in front of him. Crack! Boom! Like cutting vegetables, the small hill in front of Karna was cut in half and then exploded by the mana contained in it. A dark-skinned figure flew up from the small mound, holding a strange bow in his hands. There was no doubt that the arrow that had attacked Karna was shot by him, and it had to be Ajo. Ajo wasn't worried about losing her cover. In the air, Ajo stood upside down and raised her bow. Karna shot a few more arrows. 5 lightning bolts attracted each other and shot toward Karna in the shape of a pentagram. This time, Karna didn't use his gun to knock away the arrows. Instead, he jumped at the moment the pentagon-shaped arrows were shot at him. Boom! The bolts landed on the ground and the ground exploded. The strong wind blew Karna's white hair. Karna stood up and looked at Ajo, who had landed on the ground. While Karna was dodging the pentagram arrow, Ajona took advantage of the opportunity to flip over and adjust his position before landing steadily on the ground. Karna and Ajo stood opposite each other in the distance, giving off the feeling that they were about to negotiate. But unfortunately, neither Arzu nor Karna had the intention to speak. Ajo raised his bow and shot at Karna crazily with mana bolt. Karna, on the other hand, sprinted toward Ajo, swinging the indestructible blade in his hand to deflect the arrows. From the moment they met, they hadn't said a word and had been fighting the entire time. The surroundings were full of holes from their battle. It was like a natural disaster. That was what Wuming thought when he arrived. Seeing the two fighting again, Wuming sighed. "That black guy is Ajo?" Wuming asked in surprise. Ajo seemed to have heard him and glanced at Wuming. However, compared to Wuming, Karna seemed to be more attractive to him. Wuming smiled awkwardly. After all, he was caught talking bad about Ajo. However, Wuming didn't expect Ajo to be a black guy. Wuming didn't try to hide his presence. Therefore, not only Ajo but Karna also noticed Wuming when Wuming arrived. However, because he was fighting with Ajo, Karna didn't greet Wuming. Both of them didn't care about the others around them and only cared about each other. While they were fighting, Wuming shook his head and got rid of the thought that Ajo was a black guy. Then, Wuming stretched out his hand and a holy light spear appeared. Mythical Yggdrasil. Whoosh! Along with the sound of a relic being released, Wuming threw out a small but bright light needle. Karna and Ajo, who were in the middle of their battle, naturally discovered the needle of light. Furthermore, they sensed a considerable threat from it and hurriedly retreated. Poof! The light needle disappeared as soon as it pierced the ground, leaving a small but bottomless hole and a sound when it pierced the ground. Wuming learned this move from the Star Cup's consciousness. By condensing the holy spear, although the attack range was reduced, the power was increased. Otherwise, Karna and Ajo wouldn't have dodged in a hurry. Instead, they would have used their weapons to deflect Wuming's light needle. However, the current result was what Wuming wanted. Wuming didn't want the holy spear to turn into a powerful light cannon. This time, he only used it to interrupt the battle between Karna and Ajo. Wuming dashed forward and came to Karna's side. Although Karna and Ajo had separated, their eyes were still fixed on each other. This made Wuming wonder if there was some unspeakable gay relationship between the two of them. Can't we not fight? Wuming didn't ask anything else and just asked this question. After all, they were about to start a war with the Greek forces. It would be difficult for them to lose a top fighter like Karna. I'm afraid not. Ajo and I are mortal enemies. I don't want to fight, but it seems that Ajo wants to defeat me. I'm afraid I can't help you. After hearing Karna's words, Wuming looked at Ajo. Wuming saw that Ajo's eyes were filled with strong fighting spirit and an incomparably persistent desire. It was obvious that he wouldn't let Karna go. There were only two ways to deal with Ajo. The first was to let Karna and Ajo fight. After all, if Wuming forcibly took Karna away, Ajo would definitely chase after him. Since Ajo could join the Celtic side because of Karna, it wasn't impossible for him to join the Greek side because of Karna. The Greek side would definitely warmly welcome a powerhouse who only wanted to fight Karna. While Wuming was thinking, Ajo was already impatient. What? You want to fight 2 against 1? Even if that's the case, it doesn't matter. Fight me, Karna. Chapter 524. After Ajo finished speaking, she released her magic in a very imposing manner, causing the surrounding ground to crack. At this moment, Wuming finally had a chance to size up Ajo. Although his skin was dark, it revealed an incomparably healthy luster. Dressed in blue and white Indian Brahmin aristocratic clothes, this dark young man was full of character. Plus, he had a cold expression on his face. Wuming believed that ordinary girls in the modern world would definitely be smitten by Ajo. Wuming looked at Karna as if he had suddenly realized something. Was it because Karna was fairer than Ajo that Ajo was so stubborn about fighting him? I feel like you're thinking about something very rude, Karna said indifferently without even looking at Wuming. You're overthinking it, Wuming replied awkwardly. Of course he was joking. Wuming could understand why Ajo was pestering Karna. They were evenly matched, but because the opponent was in a difficult situation, Ajo, who had once sworn that he would not attack the opponent when the opponent was in a difficult situation, made his move. Even though Ajo's guidance was involved, in the end, Ajo still shot the arrow himself. That was the arrow that ended Karna's life, and also the arrow that would make Ajo suffer for the rest of his life. The hero Ajo had actually wanted to kill his archenemy in a murderous manner. That was too degrading. Although justice always belonged to the victor, Ajo still felt uneasy. Therefore, after turning into a heroic spirit, his wish was to fight Karna and defeat him with his own strength. Wuming had also thought it through. Let Karna and Ajo fight. After all, even if Wuming took Karna away, they would still end up fighting in the end. As for killing Ajo with Karna, Wuming had thought about it before, But first of all, it was inhumane, and second of all, this place was neither close nor far from Chicago. It would cause trouble sooner or later. Then, Wu Ming opened a portal. After exchanging a few words with Karna nodded. Then, he glanced at Ajo and walked in. Karna, don't even think about escaping. Arzu roared angrily. Don't worry, Achuna. Karna only left the Missouri River basin. He only went to the northwest of the Cordillera Mountains. After all, there are few people there. You won't be disturbed. Then, Wu Ming moved the portal and pushed it in front of Ajo. You can find Karna again through this portal. Of course, you can choose not to trust me. The choice is yours. Wu Ming smiled, indicating that he meant no harm. However, in Ajo's eyes, this smile was extremely evil. He was having a good fight with his opponent, and you sent his opponent running away as soon as you arrived. Now you're even smiling. No matter how you look at it, it's a smile that's asking for a beating. Unfortunately, Wu Ming's charm wasn't as great as Karna's. Ajo merely looked at Wu Ming deeply and then entered the portal. Of course, Wu Ming wouldn't play any tricks. At this moment, Karna and Ajo were indeed in the northwest of the Cordillera Mountains. Then, Wu Ming took out his communication device and sent a message to Edison. Karna and Ajo are fighting to the death in the northwest of the Cordillera Mountains. You must avoid that place. Pass through Denver from the south and meet up with Chaldea's master in Riverton. After a while, Edison sent back a message. Putting away the communication device, Wu Ming took Karna's place and continued running toward Chicago. Let the two of them fight it out. By the time the victor is decided, Silent Wonder would have collected all 4 Holy Grails. The sun set in the west and night gradually fell. Des Moines, a town on the Mississippi plains that was neither too far nor too close to Chicago. Because of the war, there weren't many people in the town. Also, because the sun had just set, there were only a few passers-by on the road. They all had bitter expressions and frowns. Some of the houses were damaged, and some were directly abandoned. No one cared about them. However, because this place was under the influence of Greece, it was relatively peaceful. Suddenly, a green figure flashed past like a shooting star. This made one of the passers-by wonder if he was hallucinating because of his long-term nervousness, or if he had run into a ghost. Although the sun had just set, it was still considered night. Not wanting to think about it anymore, the passers-by quickened his pace and left. In every abandoned house in Des Moines, a red-haired young man stood in a house without any light, looking out the window from time to time. This person was Rama. Following the appearance of a green figure, Achilles appeared in front of Rama. "How is it?" Rama asked. "I've found out. Those people have all gathered in Chicago because of a big hole in their spaceship. They haven't moved yet," Achilles said, rather displeased. "Speaking of which, we should just attack them directly. Is there a need to be so cautious?" Even Spartacus, who had been trying to attack Rama for some unknown reason, was released by Rama for being a hindrance. Well, actually, Rama just let him go with the flow. It would be best if he could affect the Greek side. After what happened before, I understand that if I want to take back Xido, I won't be able to do it rashly. I might even be killed. Rama closed his eyes and explained to Achilles. This was also the reason why Rama asked Achilles to scout for information. But why didn't he go himself? Achilles was the fastest to run. I deserve to die. However, I can't die. I can't let Xido suffer. I must take back Xido. Before that, I must not die. Rama clenched his fist tightly. The metal gauntlet on his arm made a creaking sound because of Rama's strength. It could be seen how turbulent Rama's heart was. As expected, I still don't know anything about love. Can't we just fight our way through the enemy? Achilles pouted and complained. Even so, Achilles still followed Rama's instructions to scout for information. Sharon had told him that Achilles must listen to Rama's instructions and not charge into the enemy's base alone. As a teacher, Sharon naturally had ways to make his disciple obedient. After all, this was the talent of a teacher. After that, Achilles could only grumble helplessly before following Rama over. If that's the case, then what should we do next? Achilles dug his ears and asked Rama. Attack. Rama paused for a moment and said, Huh! Achilles suspected that there was something wrong with his ears. Otherwise, there was something wrong with the young king in front of him. Achilles thought, You must be kidding, brother. Chapter 525. Without paying attention to Achilles' expression, Rama explained the reason. At present, there is no monkey army to help me. The only servants who can fight are you and me. Therefore, attacking is the most reliable method at present. Rama said sadly. When he thought that Sita might have been killed, Rama's heart was full of uneasiness. The young Rama still had the courage to be foolish. After Rama finished speaking, Achilles' forehead showed the word V. Isn't that the same as my previous proposal? Achilles thought with a broken heart. Suddenly, a voice came. I think you'd better wait a little bit. Who is it? Whether it was Achilles or Rama, they took out their weapons and were vigilant. Don't be nervous. Then, accompanied by an optical camouflage illusion, Wuming's figure appeared in a corner of the dim room. Wuming said that the technology of the Mecha clan was still useful. It's you. Achilles was quite upset, then he put down his meteor lance. The Celtic Saint King? Rama was surprised, but after seeing that it was Wuming, he calmed down. After knowing that Wuming was also a king, although it was a pirated version, Rama's impression of Wuming became very good. Of course, a good impression was a good impression, and the fact that Wuming injured him could be forgiven. However, Rama still remembered the crime of negligently allowing his men to imprison Sita. Although they reconciled, they still had to remember the grudge. This was the young King Rama's decision in the face of Sita's matter. Rama, who was like a child throwing a tantrum, was not noble. As long as it concerned Sita, then Rama would not give in. Why did you come here alone? Where is the master of Chaldea? After all, he was also Rama's savior, so Rama naturally cared about him. Don't worry, Edison has agreed to join forces with us. On the way back, we have joined forces with Karna to eliminate the Shutendaji who had gathered in Japan. Then, Wuming briefly explained to the two of them why Karna was a member of the United States, what they had been doing during this period of time, and their next plan. I didn't expect Lancer to join Edison's camp. Life is really unpredictable. Achilles sighed. In the previous memory they were clearly teammates, but in the end they became enemies again. But in any case, because of the alliance, they became teammates again. That person is a hero who gave alms. It's not strange for him to have such decisiveness, Rama said calmly. Although he and Karna did not come from the same story, Rama knew quite a bit about the hero who gave alms. But I didn't expect the heaven-bestowed hero Ajo to appear at this singularity. Rama shook his head. Because of Wuming's explanation, the two also knew that Ajona had been fighting Karna all this time. They both sighed with emotion. Not only did Rama temporarily lose a combat power, but he also sighed that these two old enemies who loved and hated each other could appear at this singularity at the same time. That's why this is the Holy Grail. Such a miracle can also happen. Achilles smiled softly, thinking about how he and Sensei appeared together. After hearing Achilles' words, Wuming smiled. Because of this, Rama, you can also meet Sita at this singularity, just like Karna and Ajo. These were all miracles brought about by the Holy Grail. Rama did not deny it at all and nodded seriously. Although I still can't meet Sita, as long as I know that she's still on this continent, I feel extremely at ease. Because Rama intervened in the Battle of the Monkeys and killed the enemy monkey, the dead monkey's wife put a curse on him. Even if you take back your wife, you can't really meet her. Because of this parting curse, Rama and Sita were separated again in the end, and it was a separation of life and death. This curse still accompanied the two. As long as they were too close to each other, one of them would gradually become weak, faint, and lose power until one of them left. Even if there's a curse, I will definitely find Sito, Rama said angrily. Even with such a curse, Rama still pursued Sito without hesitation, even if it meant death. If that's the case, then you should listen to me and wait for a while. During Wuming's explanation, he also told the two of them about the joint attack of the American forces, the Lone Follower forces, and the Celtic forces on the remaining two forces. If that's the case, I can wait. Anyway, I've been waiting for a day. Rama put away the eternal blade and sat cross-legged on the ground. Tisk, really, both of them are so difficult to understand. Achilles complained as he walked to another room. Wuming smiled helplessly, although he asked Romodi, "By the way, why didn't I see Spartacus?" Wuming found Rama and Achilles through mana perception, but Wuming didn't find Spartacus' mana in the surroundings. Could it be that he was already killed? Wuming thought mischievously. That traitor, I have already banished him. Rama answered Wuming rather unhappily. Banished? Could it be that Spartacus was attracted by the king follower and attacked Rama, but was then driven away by Rama? Wuming looked at Rama's rather unhappy expression and thought that it must be so. Forget it, I'll go find him. I don't want him to ruin my plan. After that, Rama and Achilles continued to stay in Des Moines, while Wuming left and embarked on the path to find the traitor. Although Spartacus' dexterity was D, even so, he was much faster than ordinary people. Therefore, he must hurry up and find him. If he was discovered or even captured by the Greek forces, although it wouldn't cause a big impact, he was afraid that he would be used against Wuming and the others. First of all, Wuming looked for traces of Spartacus near Chicago. Of course, Wuming activated the Triumph armor and the Assassin mode, so it wasn't easy to find him. Then he found some traces of Spartacus. Could it be that he was really captured? Wuming said helplessly. At this time, Wuming suddenly found another mana, which was the mana of someone Wuming had seen before. Does this mean that he wants me to go there? Wuming felt that the other party didn't have the slightest trace of concealment. He speculated that the other party was trying to attract him. Not afraid that it was a trap, Wuming quietly moved toward that place. Chapter 526. In just a few seconds, Wuming came to a small high ground where a girl with beast ears holding a bow stood there. She seemed to be admiring the moon. After Wuming saw the girl with beast ears, he also let go of the unnecessary vigilance in his heart, lifted the magic version of optical camouflage, and slowly walked out of the shadows. Since it's you, I don't think this is a trap, Atlanta. After Wuming finished speaking, the girl with beast ears turned around. This person was the famous huntress of Greece, Atlanta. You really believe me? You know I'm a huntress, Saber. Without looking back, Atlanta just closed her eyes and said in a flat tone, "Since you call me Saber, then you must have the memory of the battle of the 14 horsemen. I don't think you will repay kindness with ingratitude." Wuming chuckled. Indeed, the only saber that Wuming had ever served as was Sodric during the battle of the 14 horsemen, which also showed that Atlanta had that memory. And because Wuming freed Black Assassin Jack the Ripper, Atlanta owed Wuming a favor. It could be said that when the Argo encountered Wuming before, Atlanta pretended not to know Wuming and did not expose Wuming's information, which was considered as returning the favor. However, it did not mean that there was no friendship between the two after the favor was returned. And now, Atlanta contacted Wuming, which was the embodiment of this friendship. "If you call me over like this, won't it attract Ison's attention? Although I don't know him, I don't think that guy is very generous." Wuming walked to Atlanta's side and looked at the moon side by side. Although Ison is indeed a useless guy, it is because of this that he will trust me completely and send me out to search the surroundings alone. However, it was also because Atlanta was suitable for investigation that Ison sent her here. So, in other words, Spartacus was really caught by you. Otherwise, why would he send Atlanta to scout for no reason? Wu Ming really didn't know Ison, but through historical records, in Wu Ming's opinion, with Ison's timid temperament, he should keep all his combat power by his side. Unless there was a special situation. And Wu Ming didn't think that Atlanta was sent by Ison. It was Demetrius who spoke to Ison, so Ison sent me out. Sure enough. Wu Ming nodded and then continued to ask. So, tell me the specific information about the Greek side. Immediately afterward, Atlanta briefly told Wu Ming about the servants on the Greek side. The leader of the Greek side, or rather, the person who obtained the Holy Grail, was Ison. Therefore, the search Argo was Ison's precious artifact. The other servants on the Greek side were Archer Atlanta, Caster Medea, Berserker Hercules, Lancer Hector, and the captive archer Xido. That guy seemed to have told Ison that as long as he defeated the other forces and seized all 4 Holy Grails, he would be able to establish a country on this land that was separate from human history and would not be burned down by reason. Then, like a fanatic, Ison began to fight for hegemony, Atlanta said with a disdainful look on her face. He didn't know if she was mocking the Magic King or mocking Ison for believing the Magic King who had cheated him so easily. I really don't know what Ison is thinking. Back at the second singularity, he was already tricked by the Magus King. Even though it was with the help of Demetrius, Wu Ming didn't know about this, and Atlanta didn't care whether Ison was deceived or not, so they stopped talking about this topic. Well, I have understood the specific situation. So, why did you capture Xido? How could you threaten Rama with this? Isn't it a bit ridiculous? Rama might be controlled by others, but it was impossible for him to completely surrender to Ison. Moreover, Xido could take the initiative to die for the people when Rama was old. Perhaps when Ison threatened Rama with this, Xido would choose to commit suicide. In short, it was impossible. That guy did have such an idea, Atlanta said helplessly and disdainfully. Oh, I overestimated Ison. Wu Ming also smiled, but his smile was quite sarcastic. However, you can completely leave Ison's side. Why did you choose to stay? After all, there were not only Greek forces on the mainland. Wu Ming did not think that Atlanta would stubbornly follow Ison's side. Atlanta was not a good person, but in the face of righteousness, she would not choose to follow Ison's side. Indeed, when I was in Oceanos, I left Ison's Argo, but this time is slightly different. Atlanta shook her head. As a person who once participated in the Argo, when I was summoned by Ison using the Holy Grail, I was bound to his Argo. I can't leave this side. To put it simply, there was a master who didn't have a command seal. But this is not the whole reason. The main point is that Ison has a way to summon the demon god pillar. Wu Ming frowned. Shutendaji, who held the Holy Grail, also summoned the demon god pillar. Could it be that servants with the Holy Grail could summon the demon god pillar? Then, could Maeve, who held the original Holy Grail of this singularity, also be able to using the Holy Grail? You can use a servant's spiritual base to summon a demon god pillar, but the summon demon god pillar is more like a possession than a summon. Atlanta continued. Possession? That is to say, the demon god pillar needs to devour a servant to be able to descend? Wu Ming remembered the Judge Haim, who appeared when he defeated the demon god Shutendaji. He was afraid that the other party used the Judge Haim's spiritual base to summon the demon god pillar. Wu Ming's guess was right. Shutendaji used the unconscious Judge Haim as a medium to summon the demon god pillar. Because he used the Judge Haim's spiritual base, Shutendaji did not lose consciousness. She used the Holy Grail to split her consciousness in advance, and with the death of the main body as a trigger medium, she used the Judge Haim to summon the demon god pillar, and then fused a trace of consciousness in the Holy Grail with the demon god pillar. This was also the reason why the demon god Shutendaji made the sound of the demon god pillar and Shutendaji. Then, Ison captured Ceto. This is also the reason why Ison captured Ceto. If Ceto can't make Roromo submit, then it means that he is useless. Naturally, he can use Ceto to summon the demon god Pillar. Atlanta's eyes were evil, as if she was ashamed to be in the same force as Ison. This is the most important reason why I didn't break away from the Greek forces. Chapter 5:27. Compared to breaking away from Greece, isn't it more suitable for you to lurk as an undercover agent? Wuming said for Atlanta. Atlanta nodded and then continued. Because I don't know how to be an undercover agent, I can be regarded as working for Ison wholeheartedly during this time, whether it's capturing Ceto or obeying orders to kill other servants. That was also the reason why Atlanta did not hesitate to place a noble phantasm on Wuming. Since the Argo was destroyed by your shot, Ison has been keeping the Argo in Chicago for the past few days and embedded the Holy Grail in it. With Demetrius' help, the Argo has become a grade A+ noble phantasm. It's more than enough to withstand the attack of a noble phantasm. Wuming smiled when he heard this. He was afraid that Ison was frightened by Wuming's shot, so he installed the Holy Grail directly on the Argo. However, because the Holy Grail was transferred from Chicago to the Argo, the Dragonteeth soldiers could not be automatically mass-produced. These days, the Dragonteeth soldiers were made by Demetrius herself. Not only the quality but also the quantity has decreased a lot. In several battles with Rome, we can be said to be at a disadvantage. Wuming suddenly realized that the Holy Grail still had a lot of drawback. It could not mass-produce soldiers on the Argo. But because of this, Ison let me, Hector, and Hercules go to the battlefield together. We killed Julius Caesar and Cleopatra. At present, there are not many Roman servants left. Hearing this, Wuming's eyes lit up. This can be regarded as reducing the burden on us. Immediately afterward, Wuming told Atlanta about their plan to unite the three parties. I didn't expect you to be able to do this. Atlanta looked at Wuming deeply. Becoming the king of the Celts, destroying the Japanese forces, joining the American forces, and attacking Greece and Rome with the lone servant forces led by Master Chaldea. This really shocked Atlanta. If everything goes well, I'm afraid this singularity will be the fastest to solve among these singularities, Atlanta said thoughtfully. Atlanta herself had appeared at the second singularity before, so she naturally knew how quickly Godazzi had saved the singularity. Based on this, he speculated that the other singularities should be similar. Indeed, counting from the time Li Xiang and the others entered this singularity, I'm afraid it hasn't even been a week. Although Wuming did not know how long it took Godazzi to solve the previous singularities, Roman had told Wuming that it had been more than half a year since the anthropogenic fever. In other words, on average, it would take more than a month and a half to deal with a singularity. If all went well, Godazzi would be able to resolve the singularity in less than a week. That was quite fast. While Wuming was thinking, Atalanta paused and spoke. By the way, is it okay to tell me about your chances? Atlanta meant nothing more than, in case I'm a spy and deceived you, or accidentally leak your information. However, Wuming chuckled and shook his head. It doesn't matter even if you are exposed. After all, our plan is considered an open conspiracy. Godazzi and the others' first team went to Rome. They did not expect to eradicate Rome, but it was enough to hold them back. Wuming and the others' second team would attack the Greek forces head-on. Before the attack, the Greek side would definitely notice something, so it did not matter if they were exposed or not. What's more, I don't think Atlanta is that kind of person. I believe that Atlanta, who loves children, no matter how her appearance changes, her inner heart is incomparably beautiful. With that said, Wuming reached out and touched Atlanta's beast ears. Because the distance was too close, Atlanta did not dodge and was caught by Wuming. Ha! Atlanta was shocked and quickly jumped away. What are you doing, you rude guy? Atlanta blushed, hugged her beast ears, and stammered. Sorry, I've been interested in your beast ears for a long time. It was just a spur of the moment. Wu-Ming apologized with a smile, but the hand that was still floating in the air showed that Wu-Ming was still thinking about the touch of Atlanta's beast ears. You! Atlanta blushed, gritted her teeth, and gripped the sky bow fiercely. Ahem, I have one more thing to ask of you. Wu-Ming coughed and became serious, and it seemed that because Wu-Ming had left a good impression on Atlanta, such a simple teasing was not enough to completely collapse the image built in Atlanta's heart. Atlanta touched the beast ears on her head, calmed her face, and nodded. But it was still very popular. Immediately afterward, Wu-Ming made 2 runestones on the spot in front of Atlanta, but the runes on the runestones did not look like Lune runes. Immediately afterward, Wu-Ming handed the 2 runestones to Atlanta. Hide these 2 runestones close to your body. Don't let Demetrius, the god magician, find them. After all, Konagami magicians weren't the same as those weak magicians of modern times. Seeing Wu-Ming's solemn face, she quickly took it and nodded solemnly. Then, because of the physical contact when she took the runestones, Atlanta blushed again. Even the night could not cover it. After all, there was moonlight. And with the pretentious serious expression, Atlanta was very cute at the moment. However, Wu-Ming also knew that it was business, so he did not tease Atlanta anymore. When Ison wants to use the Holy Grail to summon the demon god pillar, just pour your mana into these 2 runic stones. If possible, the closer you are to the Holy Grail, the better. Of course, I won't force you. Wu-Ming instructed in a joking manner. I know. If there is nothing else, I will leave first. After Wu-Ming nodded, Atlanta took 2 steps, but for some reason, she stopped again. By the way, Demetrius may have become the master of Spartacus. You know his noble phantasm. That self-explosion is not a joke. After all, Wu-Ming and Atlanta both had memories of the battle between the 14 knights. Naturally, they remembered the power of Spartacus' noble phantasm during the battle between the 14 knights. Are you concerned about me? Why don't you let me touch your beast ears again? Wu-Ming smiled mischievously. Atlanta's face turned red in an instant, and she quickly left here. After Atlanta left, Wu-Ming's mischievous smile disappeared. Looking at the gradually rising moon, Wu-Ming always felt uneasy. At this time, Wu-Ming found that something was wrong. The sky is not normal. Chapter 528. People said that waiting was the longest, but it was not the case for the servants. After putting away the communication device with Edison, Wu-Ming went to the window and looked at the moon. At that moment, the moon had reached the western sky. It should be 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. Edison told me that they have met up with Tachika and the others and set off for Rome. Wu-Ming said to the shadow behind him. Rama and Achilles came out from the shadow. Finally, it's going to start fighting. It's very uncomfortable to be here all the time. Achilles bit the bristlegrass that he found from God knows where. I'm just as upset as you are. As long as I think about fighting side by side with the Celtic servants, my heart is extremely irritated. Rama put one hand on the eternal blade on his waist, and the other hand clenched his fist. Wu-Ming knew what Rama meant. The enemy who imprisoned his wife was now going to rescue his wife with the enemy. Rama's heart must be quite restless. After all, Rama and Wu-Ming had reconciled, but he did not reconcile with the other Celtic servants. It could be said that if it were not for Wu-Ming's repeated advice and a hint of pleading, Rama, the childish king, would definitely not agree. This time, I'm giving you face. Remember this, humph. Rama snorted and turned his head. I think you're doing this for the sake of saving your wife, of course. That sentence could only be thought. Wu-Ming did not dare to say it out loud. Otherwise, who knew what kind of trouble this young king would cause? So, when will the Celtic servants arrive here? Achilles asked. Wu-Ming smiled slightly. They have arrived. The moon was covered by clouds, and the earth fell into darkness. On the eastern plains outside Chicago, a large shadow moved toward Chicago with the help of the darkness. Atlanta stood on the city wall, her eyes focused. Even the moonless night could not cover the sharp eyes of the huntress. Celtic people? Atlanta said softly as if deep in thought. She then jumped, left the city wall, and returned to the city of Chicago. Without a doubt, she had gone to inform Ison. It's time for me to come out. Defending the city is my specialty. After Atlanta left, a middle-aged man carrying a javelin that was much longer than an ordinary javelin walked to the city wall. Gradually, a gust of wind blew, and the dark clouds in the sky that were blocking the moon were blown away. The moonlight illuminated the land. Countless soldiers with the same face advanced towards the city of Chicago in an orderly manner. Even Hector couldn't tell how many soldiers they had. The only two things that stood out from the rest were the 3 servants with weapons in their hands at the front of the army and the luxurious ox cart pulled by 2 divine bulls in the middle of the army. I didn't expect Queen Maeve to personally come to the battlefield. Hector scratched the back of his head, seemingly feeling helpless about the situation. Even though Greece had always been at war with Rome, it did not mean that they had never fought with the Celts. In fact, what Wooming didn't know was that whether it was the Celts, Greeks, or Romans, they had killed or injured each other. However, because it was only a battle between a single servant, the information was not circulated. Of course, from a general point of view, some information that was not so secret was still known. For example, the leader of the Celts was Maeve, because she never deliberately hid herself and even publicized it. Therefore, Hector concluded that Maeve must be sitting in the luxurious ox cart. For a woman like Maeve who thought highly of herself, it was natural for her to do such a thing. Of course, Hector didn't know Wooming's information. Not to mention that Wooming was summoned less than a week ago, Maeve didn't deliberately publicize it. Of course, this was Wooming's idea. Then those 2 spearmen must be Celtic warriors. How valiant! They didn't let a single dragonfangs go and quickly ambushed here. I wouldn't do something like that. Hector smiled bitterly as he spoke faintly. Just like what Hector said, Greece's territory was full of dragon-fang soldiers, and the Celts were able to sneak into Chicago in the middle of the night without being discovered. This was undoubtedly due to the help of the servants. I really hope it's as simple as defending the city. Uncle is very clumsy about other things. After sighing, Hector began to command the dragon-fang soldiers to prepare for the enemy's attack. Not far from Chicago, Finn waved his hand, and the entire army stopped in place as if they had received an order. This was the privilege of the Holy Grail's generals. Now the enemy must have discovered us. The next command will be handed over to the Queen, Dilmund. Finn said lightly. Yes, my lord, I will go and greet the Queen. Dilmund bowed to Finn and then walked to the rear. Just as Dilmund said, he was ready to welcome the Queen's carriage. To be able to let the army arrive here without being discovered, your wisdom is really terrifying. Next, it's time to show my bravery. Fergus grinned. Finn had a good impression of this big guy. Well, after all, they were both Celt. Then I'll have to trouble the magic sword envoy to take the lead. In just a moment, the ox cart came from the center of the army to the front line. We're here already, Finn. Good job. A noblewoman's voice came from the carriage pulled by the divine ox. Our army has arrived in Chicago, and the enemy has discovered us. So, when will His Royal Highness the Holy King appear? Finn asked politely. Your Holy King is on the other side of the city. I can feel it. In the carriage, Maeve took off her white silk gloves and looked at the bright red dragon-like pattern on the back of her hand formed by 3 command seals and smiled. Then, let's have Fergus break the city gate. No problem, right? Maeve said to Fergus outside the carriage. Of course, no problem. How can a Celtic man say no? After saying that, Fergus walked forward with the magic spiral sword on his shoulder. After the Holy Grail's treatment, Fergus had completely recovered, and now he was full of energy. On the city wall, Hector looked at the man walking forward with the magic sword. He had already guessed what he was going to do. He's going to attack the city with a noble artifact. What a headache. Then, when Hector noticed that Fergus' noble artifact was getting brighter and the magic power was getting thicker, Hector retreated. Uncle, you can't stop it. This is already a noble artifact that's comparable to a city's noble artifact. Let's escape first. Then, a rainbow-colored light exploded after Hector left the city wall. Chapter 529. Alright, I feel like I'm full of energy today. I'm sure you'll be satisfied with this shot. Fergus raised his neon sword and laughed. One had to know that the A and plus in A plus were not eye-catching individually, but when they were combined, it was no joke. Then hurry up. If it wasn't for your relic, I would have asked you to leave earlier. Maeve's impatient voice came from the carriage. Naturally, by leaving the stage, he meant that he had died. Also, although I don't mind you taking advantage of me verbally, I would be happy to see little Sai kill you. Oh, my apologies, Your Majesty. Don't worry, I'm sure His Majesty will be satisfied with this shot. I hope so. Maeve's lazy voice sounded. The neon sword in Fergus's hand began to glow. Fergus stabbed the neon sword into the ground. Calidbalg! In an instant, a rainbow-colored light extended from the neon sword to the city walls of Chicago. Boom! In an instant, a rainbow light burst out of the ground and blasted the city walls of Chicago. Countless Dragonfang soldiers were directly destroyed and turned into dust. Those Dragonfang soldiers that were lucky enough not to be turned into dust were also scattered into small pieces of bone. Ahahaha! This is truly spectacular. Fergus laughed heartily as he raised the rainbow sword. It had to be said that Fergus was really full of energy. After releasing the relic that doubled his power, he was still in high spirits. Finn and Dilmaud watched this scene calmly. After all, this scene was nothing to them. Maeve, who was sitting in her beloved chariot, nodded in satisfaction. Then, she gave an order. Everyone attack. At this moment, an irrational roar was heard. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. On the west side of Chicago, which was the opposite side of Maeve's army, Wuming, Rama, and Achilles arrived. When the three of them arrived, they saw the explosion on the east side of Chicago. That's the demonic sword envoy's precious artifact, Rama said. The person who understands a person the best is not his friend, but his opponent. Back then, Rama had fought Fergus to the death for the sake of Ceto. Naturally, he knew about Fergus' noble artifact. That should be the case. Fergus' noble artifact was still vivid in Rama's mind. To be honest, I originally wanted to end that guy directly. At this moment, Wuming spoke. Both Rama and Achilles looked over. If there are no restrictions, he will do as he pleases. For a king, this kind of teammate is very annoying. Wuming smiled coldly. At this moment, Rama and Achilles finally felt the pressure brought about by Wuming. No matter how kind this guy was, he was still a berserker. No matter how close he was to the people, he was still a king. All in all, Wuming was not a kind man. He would not hesitate to do things that would bring him enough benefit. However, Wuming still had his own bottom line. As the Origin Dragon, Wuming would definitely become 10,000 times more noble than Gaia Alea in the future. He was destined to never be the same as an ordinary person, which was why he treated everything with reason. That was why people often said that the heavens were heartless. Moreover, have you ever seen Wuming hesitate or worry when he killed someone? Although it was a pity, why would a human feel sad when he crushed an ant to death? That was the reality. Take Nazalik for example. The people in it were all demons. If it was not for Wuming deliberately suppressing them, they would have been destroyed. However, Wuming would still not do anything to them. Firstly, they were Wuming's subordinates. Wuming had mistakenly entered and became the supreme king. Therefore, he had to be responsible. Secondly, if there was good, there would be evil. Wu Ming would not purposely punish the evil. Cough cough. However, if they provoked Wu Ming would not mind getting rid of the weeds. Just like Darius, who wanted to capture Mayu. Other than that, Wu Ming was more fond of humans. Because Wu Ming was just adopted by humans, he was a human for a period of time. Therefore, he was more fond of humans, especially those who were considered good by Wu Ming. If he had the ability, Wu Ming would definitely help. Rick was a good example. Wu Ming specially went to Rick's world and helped the humans to turn the situation around. If possible, Wu Ming still liked to stay with humans, because the possibilities and emotions of humans made Wu Ming very happy. And Wu Ming wanted to kill Fergus. Well, regarding this point, Wu Ming only wanted to kill Fergus because he had flirted with Maeve before. But no matter what, he is still my subordinate. It is better to keep him alive. Just like that, the topic ended. Let's go. Maeve has already started. We can't fall behind. Saying that, the three of them walked towards the west wall of Chicago. Wu Ming started to move. On Maeve's side, there was a small problem. Hercules let out a confused roar as he swung his axe and sword at Fergus. Bang! The ground that was hit by Hercules cracked. As for Fergus, he naturally dodged this attack. Hey, why are you attacking me directly? You think too highly of me. Although Fergus was still running his mouth, his expression had become serious. Fergus was also holding the neon sword with both hands. Dilmond, be careful. This big guy is not to be trifled with. Finn held his spear and looked warily at Hercules, who had pulled out his axe and sword from the ground. Yes, my lord. Dilmond also raised his red and yellow spears and stood beside Finn. My brave warriors! Maeve didn't even walk out of the carriage. With just one sentence, countless Wu Ming-faced soldiers rushed towards Hercules. However, even if they were strengthened by the Holy Grail, the small fries were still small fries. For a great hero like Hercules, they were basically useless. Hercules roared at the sky. Even if he didn't have magic to release this skill, the roar mixed with magic alone was enough to shock the nearby soldiers to death. Then, Hercules rushed into the crowd of soldiers and began a massacre. At this moment, Hercules could only be described with 4 words. Unparalleled mowing. Ha! Accompanied by a roar, a drill-like spiral sword attacked Hercules from behind. Clang! Hercules easily blocked Fergus' attack with his axe and sword and slapped Fergus away. With the mind's eye skill, Hercules naturally wouldn't be ambushed successfully. This is a little tricky. Fergus stabilized himself as he flew away and broke out in cold sweat. When Fergus was sent flying, Finn and Dilmond also rushed forward. With the two of them together and their flexibility as spearmen, they could slightly restrain Hercules. However, they still couldn't cause much damage to Hercules. Let's release the noble artifact again. With that, Fergus raised his magic sword. However, at this moment, a rather deranged voice was heard. Ahahaha, oppressor! Oppressor! Chapter 530. In the west of Chicago, because Maeve was attracting attention in the east of Chicago, Wu Ming's side was relatively smooth. Achilles stopped his chariot, and the 3 immortal horses that pulled the chariot snorted. On the city wall there was no one, all of them were Dragon Fong soldiers. Now, these Dragon Fong soldiers had all fallen to the ground and turned into ashes. Even my chariot can't stop them. Sure enough, the small fries are not interesting. There was no doubt that these were all done by Achilles, who had just stopped the chariot. Besides, Achilles also descended as a rider. Achilles' chariot was still too strong for these Dragon Fong soldiers, or rather, the Dragon Fong soldiers were too weak. What's more, these Dragon Fong soldiers were likely to be made by Demetrius, not the enhanced version of the Dragon Fong soldiers mass-produced by the Holy Grail. Immediately afterward, Wu Ming and Rama got off the chariot. The two finally experienced the thrill of racing an ancient chariot. At this time, an arrow emitting turquoise magic power shot over. Bang! Rama held the indestructible blade and deflected the arrow with a level strength. The three of them looked at the roof of the house not far away, and Atalanta was aiming her bow here. That is, big sister. Achilles' expression darkened. After all, when he was in the 14th rider, he had a good relationship with Atalanta, and Achilles didn't really want to attack Atalanta. Oh really, why are there so many people tonight? I don't have the energy to entertain you all. A voice that was more boring than Roman came. Hector, carrying his long javelin, appeared from the shadows of the city. Hector? This was Achilles' second surprise after Atalanta. He didn't expect it to be someone related to him. In the famous Trojan War, Hector's defense was invincible, and the enemy was defeated. The Trojan side was not far from victory. After that, Achilles went to the battlefield to fight Hector one-on-one. Although Hector broke his immortality, Hector still lost. As a result, the Trojan side gradually lost. It could be said that if there was no Achilles, Hector would not die, and he would not fall into the Trojan horse trap, and the Trojan side would probably win. But there were no ifs, and now, the two old rivals of the Trojan War were reunited here. Ah, isn't this Achilles? I didn't think that we would become enemies again. Sure enough, the Holy Grail is really a magical thing. Hector didn't think that he would be able to see Achilles, and he was also shocked. I'll deal with this guy, Achilles said to Wooming and Rama riding on his meteor chariot. Said chariot, but said chariot, 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 he said chariot, and said he said although said of said. Although Hector did not think that Atalanta could defeat the remaining two servants, he did not think that she would be able to defeat them. In Hector's opinion, the remaining two servants were not weaker than Achilles. However, Archer Atalanta just nodded indifferently and did not say anything. After Hector left, Rama pointed the undying blade at Atalanta. Then, let me deal with this archer, Romo said confidently. Wooming knew that after the mana crystal healed Rama, a huge amount of mana was still stored in Rama's body. Just like how Fergus had an excess of energy after being healed by the Holy Grail, Rama was the same now. Then, under Rama's eager expression, Atalanta put down the bow. Serene, Ison is preparing to escape. Then, two gasps of surprise came from Wooming and Romo. Huh! Sigh. The southern city of the Missouri River Valley, Alexandria, camp of the Roman forces. Romulus looked at the Roman soldiers who were fighting against the incoming mechanical troops with a serious face and did not say anything. Lord God! A blonde girl in a white wedding dress walked to Romulus' side. It seems that the masters of Chaldea have joined forces with the native forces of the United States. Very good, in this way Rome, will be protected. Romulus nodded and said excitedly. However, Nero did not understand what his god was talking about. My sons, Caesar, Caligula, have left. Now all of our servants, Rome, have left. Romulus said to the pure bride. Who asked Rome to summon emperors this time? How mysterious would the emperors be? It was expected that they would leave. I will protect Rome until I die, the girl said to the god ancestor in a tone of farewell. My son, if I, Rome, also leave, then destroy the Holy Grail. Romulus said. But, God, isn't that the existence that is suppressing her? If we destroy the Holy Grail, won't she be released? The girl said worriedly. Compared to becoming the demon god pillar, I, Rome, think that we should choose to release her. As he said that, Romulus put his hand on the girl's head. If Rome, is gone, there is no need to stop her. Moreover, she is also on our side, my son Nero. I understand, Lord God. Then, they realized that instead of attacking, the mechanical troops seemed to be trapping them here. It seems that something we don't know has happened, my son. My son, welcome them in. In the west of Chicago, the battle between Achilles and Hector caused a lot of magic to explode. It was as bright as the light in the night. However, Wooming and Romulus did not pay attention to that. In short, that archer is actually on our side. Romulus looked at Atlanta, who left, and asked Wooming rather unhappily. He wanted to fight for a long time. In the end, he finally met an enemy that he thought he could fight, but it turned out to be a spy on his side. In short, it's a good thing to subdue the enemy without fighting. Wooming smiled and patted Romulus on the shoulder, indicating that he was more open-minded. Of course, I understand that, Romulus said unhappily. Then, next we need to wait, right? Wooming walked to the edge of the city wall and said jokingly. We can also watch Achilles fight Hector to relieve our boredom. Wooming showed a mischievous smile. Romulus was speechless. Chapter 531. Ah ha ha ha! Oppressor! Spartacus laughed wildly and used his seemingly ordinary iron sword to madly charge into the crowd of soldiers. At this moment, Maeve had already retreated to the back of the soldiers, or it should be said that the soldiers were constantly moving forward. Maeve, who hadn't moved, fell behind the soldiers. If one paid close attention, they would discover that Spartacus was advancing towards Maeve. If Wooming was here, it wouldn't be strange. After all, Spartacus liked to attack the so-called oppressors that he spoke of the most. In other words, it was normal for him to attack Maeve. I can't let you pass, Berserker. At this moment, a tall man with a spiral sword stood in front of Spartacus. It was Fergus, who had been sent flying by Hercules. Because Finn and Dilmund had gone to restrain Hercules, Fergus was the only one facing this mad dog. Why didn't Maeve make a move? If the Emperor had to make a move, then what was the use of a general? Are you also an oppressor? Ahahaha, oppressor, give me more oppression! Spartacus laughed loudly, no longer caring about the other soldiers, and charged towards Fergus. Although it was very short, Fergus had been a king before, so it wasn't strange that he could attract Fergus' attention. Clank! The magic sword and the ordinary iron sword collided, producing an ear-piercing sound. It was hard to imagine that Spartacus's ordinary iron sword could not break after colliding with the magic sword. Ahahaha! Ahahaha! Spartacus was like a mad dog as he punched Fergus without any pattern. Fergus was a Celtic warrior, a member of the Red Branch Knights, and also wielded a magic sword. Naturally, he wouldn't be at a disadvantage in a fight against the leader of the rebels, Spartacus. If one only looked at his appearance, Spartacus was about to be killed by Fergus. However, Fergus discovered that even if Spartacus' body was seriously injured, this berserker was getting more spirited as he fought. No, it should be said that, the more injured he gets, the more spirited he gets. TSK, I hate this kind of guy with super high durability. Fergus was rather unhappy. Spartacus' body was already injured. His right arm was almost detached from his body, and there was a big hole in his abdomen and heart by the neon sword. There were many half-meter-long wounds on his body, and even half of his head was smashed in. The wounds on Spartacus' head and heart were the wounds. When Fergus saw that Spartacus was getting more spirited, he directly attacked these two places. However, Fergus didn't affect Spartacus. Fergus even noticed that Spartacus's wounds were healing and Spartacus mutated. Spartacus, whose body had begun to change, gradually blocked Fergus' attacks and began to counterattack. Berserker can't be killed. Fergus was. Fergus took a few steps back and was ready to use his noble relic to kill Berserker in one go. Ahahahahaha! Ahahahaha! Oppressor! Come. Give me even more pressure. However, Spartacus didn't give Fergus a chance. He was really like a mad dog entangling with Fergus, in the face of a berserker like Spartacus, who had so many crazy skills. Pure magic and physical attacks were basically useless against Spartacus. This was all thanks to Spartacus' noble phantasm and skills. The glory of being abused. B+ when the magician healed Spartacus, the amount of magic consumed was a quarter of the original amount. The more serious the attack, the more spirited Spartacus was until he brought out all his hidden strength. After a certain period of time, the injuries would be gradually healed. Unyielding will, no matter what kind of pain and despair he faced, he would not give in. An extremely strong will could obtain physical and mental endurance. Roar of the defective beast, crying warmonger. A part of the damage received from the enemy can be converted into magic and stored in the body. The efficiency of the conversion of magic will increase as Spartacus' physical strength decreases. The magic accumulated in the body can be used to enhance Spartacus' ability. It could be said that Spartacus was on the same level as Hercules in terms of tenacity. Of course, it was only in terms of tenacity. Currently, there were only two ways to deal with Spartacus. The first way was to wait for Spartacus' noble phantasm to activate and self-destruct. The second method was to use the instant kill ability of the demon eyes of death perception to directly ignore everything and kill Spartacus. Of course, if one had the ability to directly destroy Spartacus' body, it could be said that he was killed instantly. Currently, Spartacus had not accumulated enough magic to self-destruct. However, Fergus had a noble phantasm that was enough to destroy 3 mountains. However, Fergus did not know about this. Moreover, his noble phantasm might not be able to kill Spartacus instantly. Fergus wanted to release his noble phantasm, but at the moment, Fergus was trapped by Spartacus, who was changing rapidly. In terms of attributes, other than Spartacus' durability being higher than Fergus, the rest of Spartacus' ability points were either the same or lower than Fergus. Coincidentally, Spartacus' agility was 2 levels lower than Fergus. Fergus also discovered this in the following battle with Spartacus. Therefore, after a few rounds of fighting with Spartacus, he used his skills to trip Spartacus and get behind him. Then, he took the opportunity to distance himself from Spartacus. Oppressor? Spartacus got up from the ground and shook his head. He then found Fergus, who was not far behind him. Then, Spartacus excitedly raised his iron sword and rushed towards Fergus. Spiral, get ready. Fergus calmly raised his neon sword as he looked at Spartacus, who was running towards him. Fergus shook his head helplessly as he looked at Spartacus, who was 5 meters tall and had accumulated mana due to his injuries. It's my misfortune to be able to meet you. Indeed, as an enemy, Spartacus was an incomparable headache because he couldn't be killed by ordinary means. Well, even as an ally, he was a headache. All in all, Fergus had had enough. He wanted to end this berserker completely. Fergus focused all his mana into the neon sword and even began to overdraw his spiritual base. After all, Fergus' mana was E. Fergus was afraid that he could not kill this thing. Taste the real neon sword. Just like Ibaraki Duji's noble phantasm, the neon sword emitted its last colorful light. Even Hercules, Finn, and Dillman stopped fighting. Maeve, who was at the back of the army, did the same. The 4 of them turned their attention to Fergus and Spartacus. Ahaf! Oppressor, oh! The light covered the ground. Chapter 532. Boom! The sound of a nuclear explosion came from the east of Chicago, and the storm raged. Wuming and Rama both stabilized their bodies and squinted at the scene filled with sand and dust. After Atlanta left, Wuming and Rama did not really go to watch the classic duel between Achilles and Hector. Instead, they ran along the edge of Chicago toward the Celtic army in the east of the city. In the end, before they could even reach the Celtic army, a violent explosion occurred. The power of the explosion was so great that it even completely destroyed the east wall of Chicago, giving people the feeling that there were no walls in the east of Chicago. Of course, whether it was Denver, Alexandria, or Chicago, there were no such things like ancient walls. All of them were built by various forces during this period of time. Wuming and Rama looked at each other, and the two quickly ran forward. Because of the strong hurricane caused by the big explosion, there was basically no sand and dust around, so the scene could be said to be clear to Wuming and Rama at a glance. In front of the two of them was a huge crater of nearly 100 square kilometers, but because it was too big, they could only estimate, but it was definitely more than 50 square kilometers. The depth of the crater was needless to say. The distance between the deepest part of the crater and the ground was about 50 meters, and maybe it was even deeper. Wuming thought that if such a crater fell on Earth, humans would probably end up like the dinosaurs. The ground on the edge of the crater was unusually smooth, and there were no impurities. It was completely the product of the downward compression of the soil by the explosion. In the center of the crater, there was a lake full of water, and the lake water was still rising. East of Chicago was Lake Michigan. At this moment, such a big explosion directly connected this huge crater to Lake Michigan. There were no traces of soldiers or servants on the scene, and Wuming's perception was temporarily disabled. There was no doubt that the army brought by Maeve was directly blown into ashes by the explosion. As for the servants who were fighting here, they were probably in danger. Wuming frowned. He was a little worried about Maeve. Even if the servants were killed, they would just retreat to the martyr's palace. However, Wuming was still worried. Because the air here was full of chaotic magic, Wuming's perception was also disturbed by these chaotic magic. It was not that he could not perceive anything, but the difficulty of perception was greatly increased. This terrible explosion, which powerful servant's noble phantasm is it? Rama said with lingering fear. Even he did not have the confidence to say that he could survive the explosion that covered an area of nearly 100 square kilometers. After all, a servant was much stronger than an ordinary person, but without a defensive noble phantasm or skills, they would also directly leave. If he did not have the golden armor, he would have to use of his noble phantasm. He would have to use his noble phantasm to survive. Of course, if Rama released his noble phantasm, he would be able to survive. Even if he did not die, he would die. He would be dead at least, he would be dead. All in all, if that was really the case, Rama would definitely not feel good. After Rama finished speaking, Wuming sighed. I'm afraid that except for Maeve, all the servants present have left. After all, this explosion was in the Celtic army. Not to mention that the army was completely wiped out, Wuming still could not find any servants. As for why Wuming knew that Maeve was fine, it was because Wuming was worried about her. Wuming's master was Maeve, so naturally, there was a contractual connection between them. Wuming naturally knew whether Maeve had left or not. Previously, by relying on this connection, Wuming knew that Maeve had come to Chicago. Suddenly, Rama said, "What is that?" Rama pointed to the lake below the giant pit that was still rising. Wuming followed Rama's gaze. In the middle of the lake, a large rock that was emitting red light floated up. However, Wuming always felt that the stone with red light was so familiar. Oh my God, that was not a stone with red light. It was clearly Hercules who was activating the 12 trials, God Hand. It was said that Spartacus was difficult to deal with, but compared to Hercules, it was simply insignificant. Hercules's 12 trials, God Hand, could be said to be a real resurrection. Even if his head was chopped off or his whole body was crushed, as long as the noble phantasm was activated, Hercules's whole body would be like steel that was just out of the furnace, emitting red light and began to reconstruct his body. Not to mention, it would also increase the resistance of the cause of death. Hercules was the real difficult to deal with. Wuming fought for a whole day to retrieve Hercules's Berserker class card. In Winterwood City, The new 7 knights and the Dark King Arthur had to work together to kill Hercules. From this, one could see how tenacious Hercules was. Fortunately, Hercules was a berserker. Otherwise, if Hercules knew how to use his brain, it would be a disaster. In an instant, Wuming flew up and rushed to Hercules, who was still recovering his body. Rama did not stop Wuming. In Rama's opinion, facing an enemy, one should be ruthless, not to mention that this was a servant from Greece. However, this would disappoint Rama. Wuming would not waste his effort to kill Hercules. Not to mention how difficult it was to kill him. Moreover, now was not the time to waste on him. The reason why Wuming rushed to Hercules was to trap him. Wuming arrived above Hercules. Along with the crisp sound of chains, several pseudo-heavenly locks were taken out by Wuming and tied to Hercules. Heavenly locks targeted servants with divinity, and Hercules's divinity was as high as a class. However, Wuming was very clear about one thing. Even if heavenly locks could only trap Hercules for a short time, heavenly locks were only able to suppress Hercules. The stronger the divinity, the tighter the heavenly locks would be. However, Hercules's strength was as high as A+. In Wuming's opinion, Hercules was fully capable of breaking the heavenly lock. In that case, let alone these pseudo-heavenly locks. However, Wuming was only holding on to the idea of stalling for time. Subsequently, Wuming took out a lot of pseudo-heavenly locks that were stored in his noble phantasm. He only left one pseudo-heavenly lock and tied the rest to Hercules. In this case, it would take a long time to use only his strength. Wuming looked at the chain mummy in front of him and nodded, as if he was very satisfied with his work of art. Subsequently, Wuming buried Hercules in the huge pit, which could be said to be the bottom of the lake. After that, Wuming and Rama looked for Maeve. Well, first of all, they had to ignore Rama's gaze. Chapter 533. Wuming searched along the edge of the crater and soon found Maeve. After all, Wuming could feel from the contract that Maeve was not hurt at all. That meant that she was not in the range of the explosion just now. At the very least, she was not hurt. Naturally, she was outside the crater. With Wuming and Rama's acceleration, it was easy for them to go from the edge of the crater to the other side. It only took them a few minutes. At that moment, the celestial bull that was pulling Maeve's carriage had fallen to the ground. It seemed that it was affected by the explosion. The carriage that was originally gorgeous and dignified had become a little tattered. However, at least it did not seem to be damaged internally. Rama came to the front of the celestial bull and squatted down to check on the 2 celestial bulls. Wuming was slightly stunned when he saw that. Then, he recalled something. It seemed like Rama was quite a caring big boy. At that moment, Maeve suddenly flew out of the carriage. That's right. She flew out and landed in Wuming's arms. Wuming wondered how Maeve could fly into Wuming's arms in a straight line. Wouldn't you fall because of gravity? Newton was about to cry. In short, Wuming hugged Maeve, who was flying toward him. Little Sai, you're finally here. You almost couldn't see me. Maeve looked at Wuming pitifully. Of course, if Maeve changed her smile into a cry, the effect would be better. This must be your wife, Celander. I'm really envious. Romo stood up and looked at the couple, who were hugging each other lovingly. He was filled with emotion. Rama was naturally envious of the couple who could be together. It was unlike him and Sido, who could not see each other because of the curse. However, Wuming was very helpless. How could you tell that this was a loving hug? It was obviously my foo who suddenly flew out, and I subconsciously hugged her, okay? However, since he had accepted Maeve, a hug was nothing. ****. Speaking of which, Maeve, what's going on here? Wuming asked. On the other hand, Rama was all ears. After all, such a huge explosion was very attractive. This is what happened. Maeve began to tell the story. After Fergus broke the city gate, Hector left while Hercules appeared. Finn and Dilmawd held Hercules back. However, Spartacus appeared and Fergus and Spartacus went against each other. Maeve, of course, was to watch the battle. Following that, there was no progress in the battle between Hercules, Finn, and Dilmawd. It was just a back-and-forth exchange of blows. Although Finn and Dilmawd couldn't defeat Hercules in a one-on-one fight, the two of them were able to fight Hercules to a draw for the time being. As for the battle between Fergus and Spartacus, it was a one-sided battle. Wooming felt that something was wrong. He knew the effect of Spartacus' noble phantasm. Soon after, Fergus saw that Spartacus was getting more and more spirited as he fought. Spartacus had transformed into a 5-meter-tall monster. Moreover, he was still transforming into a monster. Fergus decided to activate his relic immediately. Then, Spartacus exploded. Wooming shook his head bitterly. As expected, nothing good ever came out of this guy's capture. Rama tilted his head awkwardly. It was his fault. However, the young Rama king would never admit his mistake. As Maeve was the furthest away and had the protection of the ox cart, she was not hurt. However, the two divine bulls were in trouble. These two divine bulls were not Achilles' immortal horses. Now, all their bones were broken and they were about to leave the stage. Fortunately, it was a noble phantasm, so they did not have to worry too much about it. After Wooming and Rama arrived, Maeve removed the noble phantasm. The divine bulls and the ox cart turned into mana particles and disappeared. Is Berserker's noble phantasm that powerful? Rama asked. It was normal for a powerful heroic spirit to have a powerful noble phantasm. However, Spartacus was just a rebellious gladiator. To put it bluntly, he was just a rebellious slave. Moreover, he was a slave who did not succeed in his rebellion and was quickly executed. No matter how one looked at it, such a person should not have such a powerful noble phantasm. He might be an exception. However, I've seen his noble phantasm before. Even if it exploded, it wouldn't be this powerful. Wooming put Maeve down from his arms, ignoring her dissatisfied expression. Then, Wooming looked at the lake behind him that was about to be filled. However, with Master's 3 command incantations and Fergus' noble artifact charging Spartacus, it's not hard to imagine how much damage it could cause. Although almost 100 square kilometers was huge, if Karna and Wooming were to fight, thousands of square kilometers of land could be affected. That was also the reason why Wooming had asked Karna and Zhou to fight in the northwest part of the Cordillera Mountains. There were fewer people there and it was far away from the battlefield. Otherwise, they would be affected by the battle. Command spells. Noble phantasm charging. Rama and Maeve repeated Wooming's words. That's right. Wooming nodded his head. Spartacus' noble phantasm, crashing warmonger, is a permanent noble phantasm. It can convert the damage it receives into mana and store it in its body. It can increase its ability value and change its body. Finally, when the mana is full, it will self-destruct and launch a destructive impact. After explaining, Wooming paused and thought for a while. I think Demetrius must have used the command incantation to give the command to unleash the greatest power of the noble phantasm 3 times. It strengthened Spartacus' noble phantasm. In addition to Fergus' continuous attacks and the overcharging of Spartacus' noble phantasm, it caused Spartacus to reach the critical point and self-destruct before it could transform into a monster. Rama and Maeve thought for a while and realized that this was the most suitable explanation for the current situation. However, I think Fergus' noble phantasm had a huge impact on the situation here. Maeve smiled. What do you mean? Wooming asked. Maeve then told Wooming about the neon sword that seemed to have been infused with all its power. Does that mean it's the same as Ibaraki Duji? Wooming touched his chin. It seems like they've all left the battlefield. Needless to say, Fergus was the closest to Spartacus and was designated to leave the battlefield. As for Finn, Dilmund, and even Hercules, they had spent a lot of time repairing their bodies. It was likely that the two of them had also been forced out of the battlefield during the explosion. "Don't we need to care about Hercules?" Rama asked. He knew that Wuming did not kill Hercules. He only tied Hercules up and buried him. "Don't worry about that guy for now. He's no different from leaving the battlefield." Wuming waved his hand. After all, it was not easy for Hercules to break free from the pseudo-skylock that was almost the same as the real skylock. Just when Wuming was about to check on Achilles, a dark purple ripple suddenly appeared. Chapter 534. The portal has been activated? Wuming was shocked. That's right, this was Wuming's portal. "There's no time to explain. Come in quickly," Wuming said as he rushed into the portal. That's right, he rushed in. It was obvious how anxious Wuming was. Romo seemed to have thought of something and quickly rushed in as well. Maeve looked at the two of them rushing in. She blinked her eyes and walked in gracefully. Then, the portal closed. After passing through the portal and arriving on the other side, Maeve found herself in the belly of a ship. Then, a rather strange scene appeared before Maeve's eyes. Wuming was holding the Holy Grail in one hand and a spear in the other. He placed the spear on the neck of a yellow-haired guy whose face was pale with fright. Next to the yellow-haired guy was a girl with pinkish-purple hair. She was holding a magic wand with a nervous expression. The beast-eared girl with green hair was aiming an arrow at the girl's head. If the girl with the magic wand made any strange movements, Maeve believed that the beast-eared girl's arrow would definitely pierce through her head. Behind Wuming was Romo. However, at this moment, Romo was holding a girl who looked almost exactly like him. Rama's face was filled with nervousness as he kept calling out names like Cedo, Cedo. However, from the looks of it, Romo seemed to be unable to see the girl at all. He was like a blind person who could only rely on touch. However, from the looks of it, there seemed to be a problem with Romo's perception. Although on the surface, Romo could accurately touch Cedo, at this moment, Romo gave off the feeling that he was touching air. As for the girl who seemed to be called Cedo, she was already unconscious. This made my Fu daydream. If that girl was me, would Xiao Sai be as anxious as she is? This was a girl's heart. However, Wuming was not paying attention to Maeve at the moment and did not know what she was thinking. Wuming was only paying attention to the yellow-haired guy. In any case, you're someone who entered the Martyr's Palace. Can't you have a little backbone? With that, Wuming rubbed the tip of his spear on Isen's neck. However, Wuming's result was Isen's howl. Squeak squeak. Isen's face turned pale and his hands were still trembling. Don't kill me," Isen said in a trembling voice. Looking at Isen in such a state, Medea, or Lily looked at Isen with worry and disappointment. Sir Isen, after seeing such a traitorous witch, Wuming finally understood why Medea, who was abandoned by Isen, would choose to follow him again. Because Medea was in the form of a girl's dream of a girl. Wuming shook his head. A guy like that was not worth his time. However, Wuming still did not lower the tip of his spear from Isen's neck. Then, Wuming turned to look at Rama. "Rama, can't you sense Cedo?" Wuming frowned. Although he had learned about the so-called curse from Rama, he did not expect the curse to be so powerful. Now, not to mention not being able to see, even the contact between the two of them, and even their own perception, had become erroneous. This curse of never being together was not just for show. He did not know how a female monkey could place such a curse on Rama and Cedo. That's right. Even if Cedo and I were to hug each other, we would not be able to see or sense each other. Rama no longer referred to himself as you. At this moment, Rama was like a person who was chasing after hope. In the end, he realized that the hope was despair. Once Cedo and I get too close, one of our powers and presence will gradually fade until they leave. Tears rolled down Rama's cheeks. As for which party would disappear, there was no doubt that it would be the weaker party. Wu-ming recalled the scene when he came back through the portal released by Atlanta. At that time, Sito was not restrained by any chains. However, there was no guarantee that Medea's magic did not restrict her. However, even so, Sito could not stand up at that time as if she was severely injured. At that time, Wu-ming sensed that Sito's magic power was insufficient, or rather, it was severely lacking. At this moment, looking at the many injuries on Sito's body, as well as the faintly discernible signs of his spirit base disappearing, how could Wu-ming not know what was going on? From being imprisoned on Alcatraz Island to this Argo, until now, Sito had been in a state of abuse. That we did not do anything to Miss Sito. Please believe us. Lord Ison only wanted to use Miss Sito as a hostage, Medea said weakly. If that was the case, the injuries on Sito's body were caused before he was captured on Argo. It was not unreasonable. It was common for the Celts to beat people half to death when they captured them, and they did not have the habit of healing their captive. In other words, Beowulf did not know how to heal at all, and he did not realize that he should heal Sito. In short, that guy was dead. Let's not care about him. Then, Wu-ming felt that something was wrong. Medea was the disciple of the goddess of magic, Hecate. She had many healing methods, so why didn't she heal Sito? However, Medea seemed to have seen through Wu-ming's question and answered it in advance. Miss Sito has always refused me to heal her, and she said something like, even if I die, I don't want to be a burden to Lord Rama. As if recalling the scene when Sito said those words, Medea was a little depressed. She also wanted to sacrifice herself for the people she loved like Sito did, but Ison, while Medea was distracted, Wu-ming frowned in distress. However, he began to laugh bitterly in his heart. So, if the other party did not want to heal, wouldn't you forcefully heal her? How gentle are you, however, if I didn't see wrongly, Ison wanted to use Sito and the Holy Grail to summon the demon god Pillar. Wu-ming narrowed his eyes and looked at Ison, who was so frightened that he could not speak. When Wu-ming said those words, Rama instantly raised his head with anger in his eyes. Rama was slower than Wu-ming by a bit. When he arrived, Wu-ming had already seized the Holy Grail and restrained Ison and Medea with Atlanta. It was also Rama's arrival that caused the extremely weak Sito to fall into a coma. Following Wu-ming's instructions, Rama stumbled and found Sito through Sito's position that was left in his eyes. However, it did not work. Rama could not see Sito at all, nor could he touch Sito. However, he did not give up and kept calling out Sito's name. How could a man who loved his wife not be enraged when he found out that his wife had almost been used as a sacrifice? Bang! Chapter 535. Bang! Wu-ming moved his spear away from Ison's neck and blocked Rama's indestructible blade. Under the blade of the indestructible blade was Ison, who was paralyzed on the ground. However, Demetrius, who made a little movement, was stopped by Atlanta's arrows. Calm down, Rama. Wu-ming tried to persuade Rama gently. You want me to calm down? The guy who almost turned Sito into a demon god pillar is right in front of me. How can I calm down? Rama's eyes were burning with flames as he stared at Ison fiercely, as if he wanted to eat Ison alive. We are friends, right? If so, listen to my advice. Ison is still useful, so don't kill him for the time being. Otherwise, Wu-ming, who had already snatched the Greek Holy Grail, would have already made his move. Rama looked at Wu-ming and nodded. He then continued to stare at Ison fiercely. Maeve, please do me a favor. Wu-ming waved at Maeve, who looked like she was watching a family drama. Yes. Maeve smiled and came to Wu-ming's side. After that, Wu-ming took out a lot of healing potions from his precious artifact space. He then opened the teleportation door and let Maeve bring Sito away for the time being. After all, if Sito stayed with Rama any longer, he would disappear soon. After Wuming told Maeve about various things, Maeve carried Cedo into the teleportation door. "Thank you very much, Holy King." "No, surrender," Rama said sincerely to Wuming. It was an eye-opener for Wuming to be able to make the proud and arrogant Rama, who often threw tantrums, apologize so sincerely. "Since you are able to call me by my name, it means that we are friends, right?" As he spoke, Wuming placed the Holy Grail into the golden ripple under Isen's gaze. He then extended his hand to Rama. Although Wuming treated Rama as a friend when Reeves shook hands with Rama, he did not expect that. "Yes, that's right, my friend." Then, Rama and Wuming held each other's hands tightly. "Then, don't attack Isen for the time being, all right?" Wuming glanced at Isen, causing Isen to shuffle backwards in fright. After all, Isen was currently sitting on the ground. Sure. After all, this person had saved his wife, Sidwa. Moreover, this person was also his friend. Thus, Rama would naturally listen to him. As Rama spoke, he glared at Isen and no longer looked at him. Otherwise, the anger in his heart would not dissipate. Although Rama had promised Wuming to spare Isen's life for the time being, he wasn't the kind of person who would forgive someone who almost sacrificed his wife. It was also because of Wuming's face. Otherwise, even if Gudatsi was here, with Rama's childish temper, he would have used the indestructible blade to slash Isen. Yes, the kind that even their own mother wouldn't be able to recognize. "So, Isen, now you are our captive." Wuming smiled and narrowed his eyes, which made Isen and even Demetrius feel a chill. In the sky, the Argo was moving towards Alexandria. On the Argo, Isen was controlling the Argo alone at the helm. If one didn't look at Isen's livid face and Atlanta behind him, who was holding the heavenly bow and staring at Isen as if he was her prey, then Isen's situation was not that bad. Demetrius, who was originally following Isen, was at the bow with Wuming and Rama, explaining the current situation of the Greek side. In short, after sending out Hercules, Hector, and the captive Spartacus, we only have Isen, Atlanta, and me left. Wuming did not look at Demetrius. He just looked ahead, as if he was experiencing the feeling of flying in a boat. As for Rama, he sat cross-legged alone on the deck behind Wuming and Demetrius with his eyes closed, as if everything had nothing to do with him until they reached their destination, Alexandria. This was Wuming's purpose. Through Isen, he drove the Argo to Gudatsi and others' gathering place, Alexandria. At this moment, only Rome was left on this continent, and it was now being restrained by Gudatsi and others. This time, the battle against Greece was also messed up because of Spartacus' self-destruction. Although Finn, Dilmund, and Fergus had all left the stage, Silent Noise had taken the opportunity to imprison Hercules. She had also captured Isen and Demetrius, so overall, it was still a good outcome. As for Achilles and Hector, Wuming did not disturb them, just like he did not disturb Karna and Ajo. Now, as long as he got the Holy Grail of Rome, this singularity would be over. With that in mind, Wuming let out a long sigh as he looked at the clouds in the sky. At this moment, because Wuming and Rama did not reply, Demetrius waited there. Because waiting was boring, Demetrius would look at Isen from time to time, but every time, she would turn her head away in an instant. She was very nervous. She should be afraid of being misunderstood by Wuming and Rama. However, how could Wuming and Rama not notice it? Ahem. I already know the specific situation. Wuming clenched his fist and put it on his mouth and coughed. This scared little Medea so much that she trembled and almost cried. "Don't worry, I won't do anything to Isen." Wuming shook his head helplessly, trying to calm Demetrius down. But, you cast such a vicious curse on Sir Isen." As she spoke, Demetrius looked like she was about to cry. "Isn't it obvious?" Wuming said with a bitter smile. "I don't believe that Isen will be obedient. After all, he's a hero who can leave his name in the martyr's palace." Although Isen was weak, At least he was invincible when it came to piloting a ship. It could be seen from the fact that Wu Ming did not feel the slightest tremor when he stood at the bow of the ship. Moreover, the existence that could be chosen by the two great restraints and dragged into the martyr's palace, regardless of whether it was a hero or an anti-hero, would definitely not be the same as ordinary people. Wu Ming could not be sure if Ison would betray him or do something else when Wu Ming and the others attacked Rome. Therefore, Wu Ming planted a lot of complicated Lune rune tactics in Ison's body. Then, he told Demetrius and Ison that as long as Wu Ming willed it, Ison would experience what it meant to be in a living hell. Because what he said was true, Ison and Demetrius believed him. Moreover, when Wu Ming planted those complicated Lune rune tactics, Demetrius was beside him. No matter how much Ison cried and howled, Ison, who was being held down by Rama, had his body implanted with those tactics in front of Demetrius, who was being watched by Atlanta. However, Wu Ming did not know anything about curses, nor did he study them. So, what he said was a complete lie. However, no matter who saw those extremely complicated and mysterious Lune rune tactics, they would not doubt Wu Ming's words. In the eyes of others, it was an extremely vicious curse. As long as you are obedient, nothing will happen. Wu Ming looked at Demetrius with a smile. Demetrius could only nod helplessly. After all, they could not defeat Wu Ming and the others. Chapter 536. Since Rama used him as a laborer, Ison's sailing speed was still very fast. Wu Ming estimated that it would only take about 10 minutes to reach Alexandria. That. Demetrius, who had been staying beside Wu Ming, spoke hesitantly. What's wrong? Wu Ming looked at Demetrius and asked. Just tell me what you want to know. There's no need to beat around the bush. After that, Demetrius took a deep breath and asked the question. Excuse me, the purplish black hole just now, was it a teleportation magic? Wu Ming was stunned for a moment before he realized what she meant. The purplish black hole that Demetrius was referring to was undoubtedly the teleportation door that Wu Ming came to the Argo. That's a magic trick that I learned from the other world. It's called gate. Gate. Demetrius repeated the word as she pondered. The effect is that based on the place that I've been to or the place that I've seen, I can create a teleportation door anywhere. Wu Ming briefly explained how to use the gate. Anywhere? Demetrius was obviously shocked. Pay attention to the premise. It must be a place that I've been to or the place that I've seen. Wu Ming knocked Demetrius's little head. This scene was extremely similar to a teacher scolding a disobedient student. Whoa! But, even so, it's still very powerful, Demetrius exclaimed as she hugged her little head and cried. Then, are there any side effects or other disadvantages? Demetrius raised her little hand. At this moment, she was also super interested in magic. There are no side effects at all. Well, if there's a disadvantage, it's that it can't be instantly teleported. Wu Ming looked at Demetrius with a perfect smile. At this moment, Demetrius's little head was filled with question marks. After all, you have to open the teleportation door first and then walk in. If you use this trick in a direct battle, it would definitely be useless. Also, if you use this skill in battle, if you can't close it in time, the enemy can also go through the portal. After all, Demetrius could only teleport by herself. That way, she would not be able to bring the enemy along with her. You're exaggerating. Even if that's the case, the magic you've learned from the other world is already very powerful. As long as you've been to a place before, or even a place as far as your eyes can see, it's really a powerful magic trick. Demetrius was slightly dazed. Indeed, this otherworld's magic is indeed very powerful. Either it's impossible to use it at all, but once you learn it, not only is the mana consumption low, but you can also move many people. It's much more useful than ordinary spatial magic. That's amazing, Medea said enviously. Do you want to learn? Wuming suddenly asked when he saw the envious look on Medea's face. Is it really possible? Demetrius shouted excitedly. Of course. You're not Ison. I have a good impression of you. Wuming was right. Such a naive little princess. Because Ison went to the palace of the beauty goddess to make a wish, she fell in love with Ison and her life was ruined. Regarding this, Wuming naturally did not mind teaching her the portal. Of course, the prerequisite was that Demetrius could learn it. But we're still enemies. Demetrius began to hesitate. It has to be said that even if she had the reputation of a traitor, which, the current Demetrius was undoubtedly an obedient and sensible princess. Because of the hostile relationship between the two of them, she was worried about whether Wuming teaching her magic tricks would be inappropriate. She was really a cute little princess. With the current situation, do you think we can still be considered enemies? Wuming teased. Indeed. Now we're captives. Demetrius smiled awkwardly. Then, are you willing to learn this magic trick from me, Demetrius? Wuming looked at Demetrius with great respect. Yes, I'm willing, teacher. Demetrius gripped her staff tightly with a serious expression. At this moment, Ison seemed to have been removed from Demetrius's mind. Demetrius only wanted to learn the portal magic trick. Then let us begin. Immediately after, a strange scene appeared on the deck. Wuming and Demetrius stood facing each other with their eyes closed. Wuming's hand was placed on Demetrius's head. Both of them did not move at all. This piqued Rama's interest. My friend, what are you doing? However, Wuming did not immediately answer Rama. After a moment, Wuming opened his eyes and put down his hand on Demetrius's head. It's just a simple memory-sharing magic trick. After all, it's more efficient this way. Alright, actually it was Wuming who did not know how to teach. Even he himself used the game scroll to learn the portal magic trick. However, it was not impossible to reverse the process. However, Wuming had never thought of teaching anyone and no one had asked Wuming. Therefore, Wuming did not research on how to teach others the portal magic trick. After reading the nameless spellbook for a period of time, Wuming did not look at it anymore. It was fine as long as they could use it. Moreover, Wuming did not dare to guarantee that people from other worlds could learn the magic trick of the game Yggdrasil. Wuming also chose to teach Demetrius this magic trick because she was a little girl who was passionate about magic. Without any ambiguity, Wuming and Demetrius' relationship was only that of a teacher and a student. Rama did not say anything else. After all, he did not know much about magic and was not very interested in it. Therefore, he walked to the bow of the ship and looked at the scenery. As for Wuming, he looked at Demetrius, who still had her eyes closed. At that moment, Wuming's heart was filled with anticipation. Could the magic trick of the game Yggdrasil be learned by the miraculous hero spirit of this world? Wuming was very curious. After about 10 seconds, Demetrius opened her eyes. Her eyes were as beautiful as gemstones. His eyes were brimming with excitement and joy. The result was obvious. From the looks of it, you should have learned teleportation gate, right, Demetrius? Wuming smiled at Demetrius, pleased. Yes, teacher. I have successfully learned this magic trick. Demetrius shouted excitedly like a small animal. Thank you very much, teacher. Demetrius bowed deeply to Wuming to express her gratitude. For Demetrius, who was very interested in magic, being able to learn the magic trick of another world was a great favor. Just as Wuming wanted to say something, Rama, who was at the bow of the ship, spoke. What? Chapter 537. My friend, come and see that? Romo said to Wuming while pointing in a certain direction. Wuming, who reacted, felt that he didn't need to look because the chilling magic power had been transmitted to him. But even so, Wu Ming continued to shift his gaze in the direction that Romo was pointing at. This place was a few kilometers north of Alexandria City. It could be said that they had not completely arrived at Alexandria City. At the location of Alexandria City, a behemoth appeared at this moment. A huge meat pillar that reached the sky, countless eyes that were constantly twisting, and a huge magic power that belonged to the demon god. Demon god pillar. Wuming narrowed his eyes. There was no doubt that it was the demon god pillar summoned by the Holy Grail of Rome. Could it be that Sharon and the others had forced Rome into a corner? Otherwise, why would the other party casually summon the demon god pillar? Or could it be that Rome's forces were already on the verge of collapse? If that was the case, it was not unimaginable that they would be forced to sacrifice the demon god pillar. Wuming pondered. But this has confirmed that Rome was indeed defeated by Greece. At this moment, the Argos suddenly stopped. Wuming turned to look at Ison, who was at the helm. However, at this moment, Ison was squatting on the ground with his head in his hands. Even when Atlanta pointed her bow at him, he did not get up. With a sudden jump, Wuming came to the helm. What's going on? This guy suddenly doesn't dare to go forward anymore. Atlanta stared at Ison with disgust. Ison, on the other hand, ignored Atlanta's angry glare, as if he would rather die with his corpse intact. Ison, it seems that you know what that is. Wuming looked at Ison with interest. Of course I know. That's the demon god pillar. If we go there, we'll just be throwing our lives away. Moreover, we won't even have a complete corpse. I don't want to go there. Ison's face was pale, but he still shouted loudly at Wuming. Indeed, although Wuming basically cut down the demon god pillars like vegetables, that was only because Wuming's authority was powerful. Basically, every time Wuming got rid of a demon god pillar, he would use his authority. After all, demon gods were still gods. The authority obtained from killing gods was especially effective against demon gods. However, even if the demon god pillar was frequently destroyed by Wuming, it was undeniable that the demon god pillar possessed the supreme power of a demon god. It could be said that ordinary servants or even first-class servants could not defeat a demon god pillar, and the same was true for some of the top servants. Of course, unless one had a special relic or skill, only those who had reached Karna's level would be able to fight against the demon god pillars. As for the servants who were currently in Alexandria, even if Sharon was there was nothing they could do. Wuming suddenly thought of someone. If it's that vampire, he might have the power to defeat the demon god pillar. Although Pamilia was a monster and classified as an anti-hero, it was undeniable that the vampire had her own principles and restrictions. If there was a word to describe it, it would be aristocrat. If there was a word to add, it would be mysterious. After all, there was no record of such a vampire from anywhere. However, it was precisely because of this that Wuming felt that the other party had the means to deal with the demon god pillar. One must know that keeping a mysterious might not work in other worlds, but in the X-Moon world, it was a universal pass. In short, Wuming felt that the other party had that kind of ability. However, even if that was the case, Wuming could not choose not to take action. In that case, you stay here alone, we will go there ourselves. Without forcing Ison, Wuming took Atlanta away, and went to meet with Romo. Before leaving, Atlanta once again stared at Ison fiercely, which scared Ison again. Without caring about Ison, Wuming found Demetrius. Since Ison is not willing to go, then Demetrius, you will send us there. Wuming said with a smile. Hey, me? Demetrius was a little panicked. After all, at the moment, her spirit base was still that of an innocent little girl. Such a solemn task could be said to be quite difficult for her. Didn't you learn the magic I taught you? Now is the time to test you, Demetrius, open the place where your eyes can reach. Wuming pointed to the direction of the demon god pillar. When Wuming said that, Demetrius was stunned. That's right, this is the time to test my results. Immediately afterward, under Wuming's encouraging eyes, Demetrius nodded heavily. Yes. I will work hard, teacher. Immediately afterward, Demetrius closed her eyes and began to activate the teleportation gate magic, or rather, magic. Wuming directly shared his memories and feelings of using the teleportation gate with Demetrius. Since Demetrius had confidently said that she had learned it, then she must have learned it. Wuming did not think that as a famous magician of the gods, Demetrius would deliberately deceive him because she could not learn such magic. As a result, as expected, "Gate!" Demetrius opened her eyes, raised her magic wand and shouted. Immediately afterward, a pinkish-purple ripple as tall as a person appeared in front of Wuming and the other two. Atlanta and Romo looked at the pinkish-purple ripple with an indescribable expression. This made Demetrius blush instantly. Why? The pinkish-purple ripple filled the heart of a young girl. Hey? However, Wuming could only helplessly smile bitterly. This was really in line with Demetrius's character. Well done, Demetrius. You are indeed my disciple. After all, the necessary praise could not be lacking. Yes, thank you for your praise, teacher. After hearing her teacher's praise, Demetrius's face changed from red to normal. Although the color was a little strange, it was obvious that Demetrius had successfully released the teleportation gate. After nodding to Atlanta and Romo, the two walked into the teleportation gate. Then, Wuming looked at Demetrius. If possible, I really don't want my excellent disciple to fall into the hands of that guy. That guy was undoubtedly referring to Ison. But teacher, I am deeply in love with Lord Ison now. Demetrius did not care about Wuming's words. Instead, she showed a faint smile. Forget it, as long as you are happy, my disciple. Wuming shook his head with a smile and walked into the teleportation gate. I wish you good luck, teacher. Demetrius prayed silently. Chapter 538. In the city of Alexandria, which had become a battlefield, there were ruins everywhere. And under the ruins there were many residents who lived in the city. Compared to Greece, Celtic, and even Japan, Rome could be described as a force that was incomparably generous to civilians. After all, it was Rome, so it was not surprising. In this way, many residents would choose to live in the safest capital. Those people who were crushed under the ruins were such existences. However, the demon god Pillar did not care about the life and death of those people. In other words, these residents would be attacked indiscriminately like the servant. Of course, the premise was that the servants didn't do anything. Matthew effortlessly lifted a stone slab that was pressing on a woman. Gudazzi quickly went up and helped the woman up. Are you okay? I will take you to a safe place. Gudazzi said eagerly. Child. My child. The woman said weakly, looking at the collapsed house. Gudazzi and Matthew could not bear to look at the woman. The possibility of a baby being crushed under such a collapsed house was almost zero. However, as if there was a temporary traffic jam in the underworld, the baby did not lose his life. Wah wah, as if he heard the voice of his mother, a baby's cry came. My child! The woman wanted to rush to the ruins to save her child. However, she was seriously injured, and after leaving Gudazzi's support, she directly collapsed to the ground. Are you okay? Don't worry, we will save your child. Gudazzi quickly supported the woman who collapsed to the ground. Then Gudazzi nodded to Matthew. Matthew was stunned, nodded, and was ready to save the child. Human life is so strong and beautiful. Matthew smiled and thought. Then, a tentacle suddenly stretched out, or rather, smashed down. The target seemed to be Gudazzi. Matthew naturally quickly came to Gudazzi's side and blocked the attack with his shield. After Matthew came to Gudazzi's side, Gudazzi's wrist suddenly made a sound. Matthew, its target is the child. As if confirming the voice's words, the tentacle dramatically and strangely changed its direction, and its target was the ruins where the baby's cry came from. No! The child's mother screamed at the top of her lungs, trying to stop the tentacles. However, it all happened so fast that Gadotsi, the woman, and even Matthew were powerless to stop it. Matthew did not expect the tentacles to be so strange. Using Gadotsi as bait, he forced Matthew to change the formation. As a result, his target became the baby under the ruins. Just like that, the tentacle fell towards the baby. Just as the tentacle was about to fall, a voice sounded in Mashu's and Guda's ears. Brahmastra, indestructible Rakshasa. In an instant, the indestructible blade spun with thunder and hit the tentacle. The tentacle was sent flying with an indescribable sound that sounded like a scream. The powerful and perfectly controlled power did not hurt the ruins below when it sent the tentacle flying. Taking advantage of this moment, Matthew went directly to the place where the baby was crying. He used his magic to gently clean up the ruins, revealing the cute child who was miraculously alive in the corner. Although the baby was still crying, it was indeed a symbol of life in everyone's eyes. Great! Matthew quickly picked up the baby, came to the woman, and handed the baby to the woman, the baby's mother. Thank you, my child, my child. After hurriedly thanking Gadotsi and Matthew, the woman held her child and kept talking. The indestructible blade flew back after sending the tentacle monkey flying. Matthew looked at the person in surprise. It's really Mr. Rama. It was Rama's noble phantasm that sent the tentacle flying. But Gadotsi was concerned about another thing. In other words, assassin is also here? Gadotsi looked around, but she did not find any trace of Wooming. At this time, looking at Gadotsi who was searching around, Rama spoke. Don't look for him, my friend is not here. Then, Gadotsi's little face looked like she was crying. How could this be? On the other side, Sharon and the other so-called main battle servants were in charge of attacking. Wah dash! Why Elizabeth jumped and dodged a huge tentacle attack. How rude, how could you treat a lady like this? Why Elizabeth patted the dust on her dress with lingering fear and said with dissatisfaction. Miss, what time is it now, do you still care about those things? Robin Hood complained, rolled, and fired a few useless shots at the huge demon god pillar not far away. Take care of yourself, green rat! Why Elizabeth shouted at Robin Hood angrily. Robin Hood could only helplessly take a few steps back, a look of discomfort on his face. Then, the blue and white flame flew past Why Elizabeth's hair. Wadesh, Why Elizabeth screamed in fear. Do you want to kill me? Why Elizabeth touched her hair and looked at Kyoheim with tears in her eyes. Sure enough, your lizard is useless. Kyoheim did not answer Why Elizabeth directly, but released the flame at the demon god pillar while mocking Why Elizabeth. Of course, Kyoheim's attack was not very effective. Do you want to fight, fire-breathing snake? Why Elizabeth stared at Kyoheim fiercely. Come on, I'm not afraid of you. And Kyoheim also stared back at Why Elizabeth. Sigh, Robin Hood sighed helplessly. This is a battlefield, young missus. The enemy is a demon god pillar. Take it easy, even if they seriously deal with the demon god pillar, it won't have any effect. Billy Boy, who suddenly appeared, pressed his hat, and his face was full of helplessness. After hearing Billy Boy's words, Robin Hood also showed a helpless smile. As a servant, their spiritual base was too low, and they couldn't cause damage to the demon god pillar. They couldn't even attract or restrain it. Only a few tentacles attacked them, and they were the waterproof kind. Because the other tentacles were attacking Sharon. Geronimo, who was following behind Billy Boy, frowned helplessly and looked to the north. I hope the second team can complete the mission smoothly. Then they could support them. Then, Geronimo saw the lightning that represented the indestructible blade and smiled. They're coming! Chapter 539. On the so-called head-on battlefield, Ka Rong transformed into a centaur, attacking the demon god pillars with his bow in the midst of the mechanical infantry. Sharon was able to hit the demon god pillar's eyes with his skills. Why was it only at the beginning? It was because the demon god pillar was no fool and knew how to defend. Karen retreated slightly, and countless mechanical infantry rushed towards the demon god pillar. However, the demon god pillar only needed to use a few dozen tentacles to directly blow up the mechanical infantry that were attacking it. This is a disaster, Edison roared as he hugged the lion's head behind the countless mechanical infantry soldiers. So noisy. Be quiet. But at Madame Blavatsky's snarl, Edison obediently held his tongue. If this continues, we will be wiped out. Sharon frowned and came to the two to see if they could come up with a plan. The three looked at Nightingale, who was charging with the mechanical soldiers but was constantly being pushed back. They felt helpless and relieved. If not for Nightingale's stubborn personality, she would not have attracted the demon god pillar. After all, it was a berserker. However, if this continues, something will happen to Miss Nightingale. Helena looked worriedly at Nightingale, who was constantly spinning and jumping under the demon god pillar's tentacles, and was sent flying again. As if toying with Nightingale, the demon god pillar did not use its full strength. Although it seemed like the demon god pillar's attacks were ineffective, Sharon and the others noticed that the demon god pillar was going easy on them. Otherwise, it would not have the time to attack Matthew and the others. If we look at the worst-case scenario, this demon god pillar might be smarter than we thought. Helena frowned as if she was facing a great enemy. I have a bad feeling. I feel like the demon god pillar is waiting for something. Karen's face darkened. This way, the demon god pillar was definitely scheming something. Edison was like a lion and did not understand the conversation between the two. At this moment, a voice resounded through the sky. A gigantic spear of light that had never appeared before came from afar and hit the demon god pillar. The demon god pillar let out an unrecognizable voice. It was obvious that the noble artifact's owner had poured a huge amount of magic into this attack. The noble artifact was released. That was the Holy King's voice. Edison said as he looked around for Wu Ming. Over there. Sharon pointed. At this moment, Wu Ming, with his A+ grade agility, launched a surprise attack on the demon god pillar. At this moment, Wu Ming had already put on his armor and wore a helmet that completely covered his head. Wu Ming was like a silver dragon. As for the demon god pillar, it was as if the person it was waiting for had arrived. Regardless of whether it was the mechanical infantry or Nightingale, the demon god pillar no longer cared about them. Countless tentacles extended from the demon god pillar's muscles to attack, Wu Ming at the same time. The Wu Ming was the demon god pillar's, and Wu Ming. Countless tentacles surrounded Wu Ming from all directions, which could be described as a killing move for ordinary servants. However, for Wu Ming, although it was dangerous, it was not fatal. Wu Ming did not stop and continued to run toward the demon god pillar, ignoring the Wu Ming's corrosive tentacles. Wumdish, the air vibrated, and a buzzing sound was heard. Then, the magic around Wu Ming's body condensed, and under Wu Ming's control, the condensed magic exploded in the surroundings. Boom! A dull sound was heard, and a ring of magic that could be seen with the naked eye spread out from Wu Ming in an instant. The encirclement formed by the Wu Ming's tentacles was instantly broken through by the magic that could be seen with the naked eye. Like petals, the tentacles were fragmented and turned into pure magic that dissipated. This was pure power that did not require any fancy trick. What? Helena was shocked when she saw this scene. What's wrong? Edison asked cautiously. Madame Blavatsky was just sighing at his strength. Sharon smiled helplessly and explained to Edison. Just the simple release of magic was enough to destroy the metal of the tentacles that everyone worked together to destroy. From this, it could be seen how powerful Wu Ming was in terms of the amount and control of magic. Compressing a large amount of magic, condensing it around his body, and then releasing the compressed magic in the form of Wuming's magic was a test of his control. And the premise of this was that he had sufficient magic power. It can be said that the magic power just now was comparable to the magic power required by the light spear, or even exceeded it by a lot. To be able to use the magic power of such a noble artifact to release magic power, it was not something that a first-rate servant could do. It could be said that even a first-rate servant would not have such magic power. After all, if the amount of magic power was not enough, it would be impossible to do it. And to be able to use that kind of magic power twice without batting an eyelid, it could be seen that Wuming was not ordinary. The most important thing was that Wuming only used magic power to destroy the tentacles, which was enough to prove that Wuming was powerful. True power was not a fancy ability, but a kind of power that had reached the pinnacle. So that's how it is, Your Excellency Holy Ruler is indeed Your Excellency Holy Ruler, to be so powerful. Edison's lion head showed an expression of sudden realization. However, such an expression was quite comical in the eyes of others. Since the Holy Ruler is here, it means that the Greek side has been resolved. Helena breathed a sigh of relief. Sharon seemed to agree with Helena's opinion and nodded. However, I feel a little uneasy about the demon god pillar here. Sharon looked at the demon god pillar. As a sage who had taught many heroes, Sharon had a feeling. That demon god pillar was not an ordinary one, but one with a strong will. It could be seen from the previous performance, so Sharon was very worried that the other side was up to something. However, even if there was a conspiracy, such a battle was not something they could investigate. In short, we should take this opportunity to save a few more injured residents. We can't let down Tachika's sincerity. The three nodded and slipped away from the battlefield. At the same time, they also took away Nightingale, who still wanted to charge at the demon god pillar. Edison brought the few remaining mechanical infantry and began to search for survivors. On Wuming's side, Wuming looked at the demon god pillar and vaguely felt a sense of familiarity. But even so, Wuming's actions did not stop. Wuming waved his hand and the holy spear of light appeared out of nowhere and landed in Wuming's hand. Then, Wuming raised the spear of light to his shoulder and threw it at the demon god pillar like a javelin. The spear of light gradually thinned and turned into a needle of light. However, the demon god pillar only summoned a few more tentacles, blocking the needle of light. Wuming was not surprised. After all, Wuming had only injected a small amount of magic power, so it was not surprising that the demon god pillar could block it. At this moment, the demon god pillar suddenly spoke. "Dragon of Origin, you're finally here." Chapter 540. Wuming's expression changed as he recognized the voice. "Lev." Wuming said the name. "As expected of the Dragon of Origin, you still remember me. But my current name is Flawless, Demon God Pillar Flawless." The Demon God Pillar laughed. "But I don't think it's such a coincidence that the Demon God Pillar summoned this time is you." Wuming didn't believe that this wasn't Lev's doing. With 72 Demon God Pillars, Wuming didn't think his luck would be so good. The 72 Demon God Pillars are one. Unless you can destroy all the Demon God Pillars in an instant, I won't die. Demon God Pillar Flawless laughed eerily with Lev's voice. Wuming could imagine Lev's ugly face. However, this provided Wuming with information. "I did think that you wouldn't die so easily, but I didn't expect us to meet so soon." Wuming didn't attack again, and Demon God Pillar Flawless didn't attack either. The two of them started to talk. "This can't be helped. I'm the Demon God Pillar in charge of the information room." In other words, the other party might be able to see Wuming through some means or opportunity. "As soon as you came to this singularity, I was already paying attention to you through the Holy Grail, Serene." As if victory was already in his hands, Demon God Pillar Flawless said slowly. Wuming couldn't wait for someone to tell him the current situation, so he didn't disturb him and calmly listened to the demon god pillar. Oh, then what about that guy? Didn't he come personally? The chaos here is a gift he prepared for me. I don't want to steal the limelight. Wu Ming mocked the Magic King. Why would our king care about an immature dragon of origin? To tell you the truth, even if the Master of Chaldea conquered all 7 singularities with your help, it wouldn't affect our king at all. In other words, the other party had the confidence to win, or had the strength to not be disturbed. Wu Ming pondered. This is also the reason why our great king let you go in London's underground cavern, he. Demon god Pillar Flawless let out a terrifying laugh. Wu Ming frowned but didn't refute him. Wu Ming clearly knew that he was indeed very weak. When facing a powerful enemy like the Magic King who was strengthened by the Black Origin soil, Wu Ming only had 2 things that could compare. The 12 incarnations who killed God, stole the god's authority, and combined with his own abilities and origin baptism. Also the Blade of Salvation Divine Blade Savior's authority. The Blade of Salvation was also the Divine Blade Messiah's power. Although many of Wu Ming's abilities had been baptized by origin, there was no doubt that an ability or item with a high starting point would have a high achievement after being baptized by origin. Just like the 12 incarnations and Blade of Salvation. Other than that, whether it was the Loon magic that Wu Ming had learned, the World Trees magic from the alternate world, or the various powerful items that he had obtained, or even the relics that had been turned into Wu Ming's own, they were all rather useless. That was because when facing an enemy like the Magic King, these abilities and relics were useless. Moreover, Flawless also said that Wu Ming was an immature root dragon. Although in the eyes of many, Wu Ming was already very powerful, Wu Ming himself knew that he was actually very weak. After staying in the root dragon for a long time, Wu Ming gradually realized that a mature root dragon could be said to be the ruler of all the worlds, the protector of all the world. If he had to use a word to describe it, it would be the suppression of all the world. In other words, it was the heavenly axiom. It could be said that it was precisely because Wu Ming knew that he would eventually become such an existence that Wu Ming began to face the love that Maeve and the others had for him. After all, if Wu Ming kept delaying until then, perhaps Wu Ming's heart would really have turned into the merciless heavenly Tao. Take the planet's consciousness, Gaia, and the human consciousness, Alea, as an example. As long as it did not threaten Earth and the human race as a whole, they would not care. Moreover, if it was only a threat to one side, the other side would basically not care. For example, in the crisis of the Moon world, the Magic King's means had threatened Alea, so Alea naturally had to do her best to save it. The Holy Grail's ability to summon servants on its own was the self-defense mechanism that Alea had activated. However, because the Gaia and Alea of this world had a slightly special relationship, the two of them could be considered to be in love, probably cough cough. In short, if Wu Ming had reached adulthood, then there was no doubt that he would be able to defeat the Magic King effortlessly. But now, the Magic King who had the origin black mud, was not afraid of Wu Ming who was an immature origin dragon. After all, if hope was killed in the cradle, then this so-called hope would be nothing. Then, what is the meaning of your current actions? Is it purely for the sake of waiting for me to pass the time? Wu Ming was naturally referring to the matter of pretending to be led by the nose by Sharon and the others. Not only that, Wu Ming, who had fully activated his mental power, saw why Lisabeth and the others' futility, and also saw that Flawless was deliberately targeting Gudatsi and Matthew. Wu Ming sensed that one of the tentacles of the demon god pillar was absent-minded, and his intuition told him that Gudatsi and Matthew, who were searching for survivors, were in danger. Wu Ming trusted his intuition the most. As the origin dragon, all the worlds would subconsciously help Wu Ming, and this so-called intuition was also the help of similar worlds. Otherwise, why would Romo meet Godazzi so coincidentally and repel the tentacle that wanted to kill the child Matthew was about to rescue? It was because Romo was asked by Wuming to meet Godazzi and the others. Just treat it as my selfishness towards Matthew. Flalos, or rather Lev, was silent for a few seconds before answering Wuming. Oh, the demon god pillar has selfishness? That's really surprising. You don't have to deliberately mock me. No matter what, I have spent a lot of time in Chaldea. After saying that, Flalos stopped talking about this and turned to the root of this matter. Then, let's start the ravaging. Treat it as the price for the ravaging you did to me? As he said that, the countless eyes on the demon god pillar lit up with red light, and countless black and purple mist emitted from the demon god pillar. The ravaging began. Chapter 541. Needless to say, the demon god pillar Flalos this time was different from the one Wuming encountered in the Winterwood City. Not only was the shape and color more vigorous, but the attack power of the demon god pillar had also increased a lot. Because Flalos' target was Wuming, it did not disperse its attack. Instead, it deliberately gathered together to attack Wuming. Wuming naturally did not die in the first wave of attack, but he was slightly injured. Looking at the ground around the demon god pillar, that was destroyed by the demon god mist and heat ray, Wuming's sense of danger towards Flalos increased by another level. The power of the heat ray emitted by the demon god pillar's eyes increased a lot. Anyway, it gave Wuming a sense of crisis. Although it was a little exaggerated, Wuming did rely on his skills and speed to avoid the heat ray. However, because it brushed past him several times, Wuming felt the intensity of the heat ray. Not only that, the dark purple demon mist was also a lot stronger. It could be said that if it were Elizabeth and the other servants, they would not be able to last more than 5 seconds in the demon mist. As for Sharon, who was restrained by poison, the demon mist with the poison attribute could even send Sharon back to the martyr's palace when it came in contact with him. Wuming had the noble armor, so his body was not hurt. However, the demon mist had the ability to ignore defense and corrode the spiritual base. A part of Wuming's spiritual base was directly corroded. As a result, Wuming repeatedly used his magic to release skills and rushed out of the area covered by the demon mist. The demon god pillar Flalos seemed to be deliberately playing with Wuming. After the first wave, it retracted the demon mist and did not attack again. How is it, Celander? This is the power that our king has bestowed upon us. The demon god pillar's eyes spun faster, and the demon mist was vaguely released again. It was not a precursor to an attack, but a sign of excitement and demonstration. After stretching his limbs, Wuming felt relieved when he sensed that Godazzi, Sharon, and Elizabeth had retreated. His body was a servant's body that he created. Even if he died, it wouldn't matter. But Godazzi wasn't like that. She was a complete human being. Seeing that Godazzi and the others were covering the few rescued residents and retreating into the distance, Wuming once again used his mental power to search the ruins. Wuming heaved a sigh of relief after checking that there were no living beings. This way, he wouldn't have to worry about his surroundings. Your power comes from the Holy Grail, right? Since the Holy Grail was created by the Magic King, it's not hard to guess that it's able to help you demon god pillars. Wuming did not feel dispirited because the demon god pillar Flalos temporarily gained the upper hand. Instead, he began to make inferences. Oh, that's true. But so what? Flalos believed in the power given by its king. It was not afraid of Wuming's, pretending to be calm in its eyes. This is power. The power that can defeat you in this era. The demon god pillar roared. Countless heat rays and demon mist attacked again. The momentum was much stronger than before. After I kill you, I'll kill everyone in this era. Who cares about being the last master of mankind? I'll let Chaldea and the others meet their doom in despair. At that moment, Flawless was a little excited. However, this had nothing to do with Wuming. He continued to dodge. Wuming retreated 1,000 meters away. Indeed, this body doesn't have the ability to deal with you for the time being. Even if it was the legend of the Holy King, mythical Yggdrasil, its greatest power without charging could only injure the demon god pillar that had obtained the power of the Magic King. If he wanted to kill it, he would need to charge up for a long time. Of course, Flawless would not give Wuming the chance. That was why Wuming did not have the ability to deal with Flawless for the time being. But unfortunately, I've just become good friends with Rama. Wuming smiled at Flawless. However, this smile made Flawless feel uneasy. Although Flawless was not afraid of Wuming, he did not think that Wuming was bluffing. What if he really had a way to deal with him? With this thought, Flawless increased the amount of magic output. In an instant, the countless eyes on the demon god pillar began to bleed. The amount of magic output exceeded the demon god pillar's tolerance and hurt itself instead. However, the result was a dark ball of light that was comparable to the power of dozens of holy swords appearing in front of the demon god pillar. Wuming could feel that if the dark ball of light exploded or formed into a light cannon, the power would definitely be able to blow up a huge hole in the American continent. It could even be said that it would not be difficult to create a new lake. It could be said that if Wu Ming did not activate his noble artifact, Arthur's gift, he would have been forced to leave the stage after being injured by this attack. As Flawless, who had been observing Wuming ever since he came to this singularity, he naturally knew that Wuming had such a noble phantasm. However, he knew that Wuming's noble phantasm was not like the legendary Avalon that could form an invincible domain. Wuming's noble phantasm was only an invincible shield. In that case, he only needed to go around the invincible shield. As Flawless, who had accepted the power of his king, he naturally had such a method. No matter if it was using the space fault or forcefully turning the light cannon, Flawless could do it. At that moment, Wuming moved according to Flawless' prediction. The armor on Wuming's body instantly disintegrated. Without a doubt, Wuming was ready to use this invincible shield. However, the next scene made Flawless think that Wuming was crazy. After the armor disintegrated, the various parts quickly flew around the demon god pillar, surrounding the demon god pillar and Wuming. Then, every armor part began to connect with each other. A seemingly transparent but incomparable light film appeared, wrapping Wuming and the demon god pillar Flawless, leaving only the sky. After all, the height of the demon god pillar could be said to be so high that one could not see the end. To be more specific, at that moment, an incomparable square barrier with no top covered each of them. It was the kind of invincible light barrier that would not affect the outside world because the aftermath would reach the sky. If the power was really strong, it could directly break through the atmosphere. There was only one word to describe it, and that was, trapped beast deathmatch. I see. Looks like you want to die together with me, Flawless said mockingly. In such a confined space, no matter if Flawless's dark light ball exploded or acted as a light cannon, the end result would be him being injured or even killed. Even with the top as a vent, no, it should be because of this vent that the aftermath of the damage would spread to the demon god pillar that reached the sky. Wuming smiled. Then I'm sorry. You think too much. Then, Wuming waved one hand and a few weapons appeared behind Wuming. I just don't want my attack to hurt Tachika. Chapter 542. At that moment, Wuming looked like Gilgamesh, who was using the gate of Babylon. However, the only difference was that the 5 armies were not lined up side by side behind Wuming. Dozens of glowing weapons floated around Wuming like stars surrounding the moon, wrapping around Wuming. There were many types of weapons, such as discs, javelins, long sticks, short sticks, trident spears, giant swords, whiplocks, giant hammers, bows and arrows, and so on. Wuming waved his hands, and the weapons around him seemed to be pulled as they rotated slowly. Flawless, on the other hand, began to guard against Wu Ming's meaningless attack. "What do you mean?" Demon God Pillar Flawless's voice sounded a little frightened. Although it was not afraid of Wu Ming's tricks, it had no choice as the sun's incarnation had scared it. After all, the sun was not a trick, but a killer move that could be fatal. In the big hole in Winterwood City, Wu Ming's sun made Flawless suffer. In the end, Flawless's body could not take it anymore, so Lev came out to replace it. In the end, Lev was also tortured by Wu Ming's flame until he fainted. After all, Wu Ming's sun incarnation was an inextinguishable flame. Almost nothing could extinguish the sun incarnation that Wu Ming used. "You're just bluffing. Don't try to scare me," Flawless roared. Its eyes bulged slightly, and the dark light ball in front of it doubled in size. Although that was what it said, to make Flawless so angry, it was obvious that it had been suppressed. Wu Ming could see through its trick of using anger to cover up its fear. To put it simply, Flawless was actually deceiving itself. Indeed, this body does not have the ability to deal with you, but don't forget about the Holy Grail. As he said that, Wu Ming took out the Holy Grail that he had obtained in Denver from his precious artifact space. Difficult. Flawless recalled the fear of being dominated by the sun. Through the connection between the demon god pillars and his own intelligence ability, Flawless naturally knew how demon god Shutting, who had fused with the demon god pillar, died. The sun. With the blessing of the sun god given by Wu Ming through Tamamonome and the Holy Grail as a medium, Wu Ming successfully summoned the sun incarnation. As if expelling all darkness, the incomparably dazzling sunlight illuminated the earth, and the world fell into white. This was the last scene that Flawless saw through demon god Shutting's perspective. Then, it was like a broken string, and nothing else could be seen. Flawless was very sure that it was the sun that had once ravaged him, but fortunately, it seemed that this move could only be used once. The blessing of the sun god had been completely used up. Since then, I have been paying attention to you. You didn't receive the blessing of the sun god at all, Flawless roared. The funny thing was that he could have released his sure-kill dark light ball directly. While Wu Ming was still talking to Flawless, he could have killed Wu Ming. However, Flawless was already terrified. Looking weak on the outside was not scary, but the pain in his heart was fatal. "I'm not going to use that move. Just as you said, I don't have the blessing of the sun god as a medium anymore." Wu Ming smiled and shook his head. However, Wu Ming's smile was incomparably terrifying in Flawless' eyes. Ah! With a roar, the dark light ball in front of the demon god pillar exploded instantly, forming a huge dark light beam that swept towards Wu Ming. However, facing Flawless' light beam, Wu Ming was not nervous at all. "Didn't you say that I was scaring you?" "Then, whether I'm scaring you or not, it's up to you to try it yourself, Flawless." As he spoke, the weapons that were emitting golden light around Wu Ming instantly gathered together and integrated into the Holy Grail that Wu Ming was holding. Swoosh, dong! The huge light beam instantly covered Wu Ming, but the light beam did not stop. Instead, it exploded towards the back and instantly hit the defensive light wall formed by Wu Ming's noble artifact. There was a huge collision sound. At this moment, a light beam that was extremely small compared to the light beam shot out from the demon god pillar and soared into the sky. Then, the light beam slashed from top to bottom, quickly and fiercely, and Flawless' light beam was split apart. After the light beam disappeared, Wu Ming's figure appeared. Not only was he unscathed, but the Holy Grail in his hand was also gone. Instead, there was a holy sword that was similar to the Sword of Victory, but more elegant and powerful. What? Floros was horrified. It could not accept and was not willing to accept this result. That's the power of our king. How could you dissolve it so easily? Floros could no longer calm down. That sword, where did it come from? As if all eyes were about to pop out, countless eyes looked at the holy sword in Wu Ming's hand. I don't need to say anything more to you, Floros. As he spoke, Wu Ming raised the holy sword in his hand and injected magical power into it. The holy sword erupted with holy thunder and unprecedented light. It was an ultimate power that seemed to be able to split a star. Even the invincible light film formed by the armor could not completely block such power because it was not a damage. Just like that, the power that could split a star seeped outside. In an instant, the ground of the singularity let out a sorrowful cry and the sky was shrouded by dark clouds. Gudatsi, who felt uneasy, did not want to leave no matter what. She insisted on waiting not far away. She was waiting for the disaster to end, or waiting for the disaster to come. Inside the invincible light film formed by the armor. Damn the dragon of origin! Floros seemed to have known his ending. He was not willing to accept his end and launched an attack. Compared to the beginning, the number and quality of tentacles were one step higher. The heat ray that was comparable to the holy sword and the demon mist that was so dark that it made people tremble were all attacking Wu Ming. The price that Floros paid for releasing these super-powerful attacks was that the entire body of the demon god pillar had shrunk by at least 3 times. At that moment, the demon god pillar was like a bamboo pole that was about to die. However, Wu Ming did not care about it at all. Before these attacks arrived, Wu Ming only slashed in the direction of Floros. In an instant, the power that could split a star turned into a light beam that was even bigger than the one released by the demon god pillar. Looking at this power that could definitely destroy Gaia, Floros finally understood why Wu Ming used the invincible defense to trap them one by one. It was not that he wanted to use the power of the demon god pillar to perish together, but Wu Ming was afraid of hurting this land, this singularity. Floros had no doubt that Wu Ming's move could directly break this singularity. Then, Floros did not know what happened, because the power of the holy sword that could split a star had already covered it. In the outside world, Gudatsi's face was gloomy. Behind her stood a group of followers. Everyone looked nervously at the transparent barrier not far away that was covered in white. Ka Rong raised his head and looked at the light beam that had already rushed out of the sky. He felt the magic power that could break the barrier and let out a sigh of relief. It seems that he is hiding an unimaginable identity. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.